My wife, Mia, 31F, in a horrific vehicle accident 6 months ago. We have twin sons, Ethan and Noah, 7M, and their transition to life without their mother has been extremely challenging. Mia and I met in high school. She was a senior and I was a sophomore. It was not love at first sight or anything dramatic like that. We were lab partners in AP biology, and at first we couldn't stand one another. Mia believed I was a slacker because I was often joking around, and I thought she was stressed because she was obsessed with obtaining perfect grades. However, as we worked together during the semester, things changed. I could see Mia was passionate about science, and her eyes lit up when she talked about her ambitions to work in technology. She recognized that, despite my joker demeanor, I was actually quite excellent at biology and cared about succeeding. We began hanging out outside of class, studying together, and those study sessions evolved into date nights. When Mia left for college, everyone assumed we wouldn't last. They believed high school relationships couldn't survive long distance, but we proved them wrong. We talked every day, saw each other as frequently as possible, and when I graduated 2 years later, I chose a college near her so we could finally be together again. We married just after I finished college. There was a little ceremony in Mia's parents' backyard. Mia's sister, Jen, 35F, served as maid of honor, and my best college mate was the best man. Mia's parents, John, 62M, and Linda, 60F, were overjoyed. They had always regarded me as a son and now it was official. We had the boys a year later. It wasn't planned and we were both shocked to learn Mia was pregnant, and much more so when we discovered she was carrying twins. However, the moment Ethan and Noah were born, they became our entire universe. Mia was always the ambitious one. She secured a position as a software engineer at a major technology business right out of college and swiftly rose through the ranks. I had studied education with the intention of becoming a teacher, but when the boys were born, we felt it would be more practical for me to stay at home with them. Mia's pay was more than adequate to sustain us, and childcare for twins would have consumed the majority of my potential teaching compensation anyhow. I like being a stay-at-home dad. I got to see all of the boys' firsts. First steps, first words, and first day of school. Mia would come home every evening, eager to hear about their day, and weekends were always spent with the family. We lived a lovely, happy life. Then 6 months ago, everything shifted. Mia was heading home after a late night at work. It had been pouring, the roads were slick and a drunk driver had run a red light and damaged her vehicle. She was killed on impact. In a moment, our lovely little world was shattered. The first several weeks following Mia's death were a fog. I was in shock, going through the rituals of preparing the funeral and caring for the boys without fully absorbing what had happened. Jen and Mia's parents were quite helpful throughout that time. They essentially moved in, preparing meals, assisting with the boys, and taking phone calls from well-wishers. However, as the weeks passed into months, I began to feel suffocated. Jen, in particular, appeared reluctant to leave. She'd come over every day, frequently staying until late in the evening. At first, I was appreciative for the assistance. She'd cook meals, help with the boys' homework, and even begin teaching them how to play the piano, which Mia had always wanted to do but never had the time for. Jen's behavior did, however, become more controlling and judgmental over time. She began making comments about my parenting. She'd say things like, "Mia would have done it this way," or "the boys need a woman's touch." It hurt, but I brushed it off, believing she was also grieving. She then proceeded to criticize my job search efforts. With Mia gone, I needed to start earning money to support the boys, but if I mentioned a job application or an interview, Jen would reply, "You should be focusing on the boys, not your career." Or, "Mia wouldn't want you to put the boys in daycare." I tried to explain that I had no choice. Our funds would not last forever, and while Mia had life insurance, I preferred to save that money for the boys' future. But Jen would not listen. She insisted that she and her husband, Mark, 37M, could help out financially if necessary. Jen arrived unannounced with a bundle of documents last week, escalating the situation. She sat me down at the kitchen table, where Mia and I had spent countless evenings discussing our future, and informed me that she thought it would be best if she became the boys' legal guardian. I was stunned. Jen went on to say that she and Mark could create a more stable home situation for the boys, who needed a mother role. She discussed how they had a larger house and a better school district, how Mark's position as a lawyer meant they were financially stable, and how she could remain at home full-time with the boys, just as I had done. I listened in disbelief as Jen explained her idea. She assured me that I could still see the boys whenever I wanted, and that this was not about taking them away from me, but about doing what was best for them. She even proposed that I move in with them, at least temporarily, to aid with the transition. When I finally found my voice, I told her, no, absolutely not. These were my children and Mia's children. We raised kids together and planned their futures together. I was fully capable of raising children on my own. Jen did not take my refusal well. She started ranting, accusing me of being selfish and not thinking about what was best for the boys. She brought up every minor error I'd made in the previous 6 months, such as forgetting to pack Ethan's lunch for a school trip or Noah receiving a low mark because I didn't assist him study for an exam. She had the audacity to suggest that Mia would be disappointed in me. That was the final straw. I lost my temper and ordered Jen to leave. I told her she was no longer welcome in our home unless she respected my status as the boy's father. She departed in tears, and I assumed that was the end of it. Yesterday, I received a call from Child Protective Services. They informed me that someone had expressed concern about my abilities to care for the boys. They didn't say who created the report, but I knew it had to be Jen. I am enraged and afraid. A CPS worker is due to investigate our home next week. I contacted John and Linda to explain what had happened, hoping they could persuade Jen. Instead, they agreed with her. They believe I am being unreasonable and should consider Jen's offer for the benefit of the boys. They even propose that I live with them and allow them help raise the children. I feel like I'm under attack from all sides. These people claim to love my boys, but they are attempting to destroy the only stable thing the twins have left, their bond with me. I'm doing my best to balance everything, and while I've made mistakes, I adore my sons more than anything in the world. Last night, after I put the boys to bed, I sat in Mia's former home office, surrounded by her belongings. Her degrees on the wall, family photos on the desk, and even her favorite coffee mug, which was right where she left it the morning before. I broke down and cried for the first time in months. I miss her so badly. I miss her counsel, her laugh, and the way she could always relax me when I was stressed. I'm not sure how to do this without her, but I need to figure it out for Ethan and Noah. They have already lost their mother. I can't let them lose their father either. I do not know what to do. Should I concede to avoid a messy legal battle? Should I lose relations with Mia's family entirely? How can I safeguard my rights as a father while simultaneously doing what is best for my boys? Update 1. It's been a month since my previous post, and a lot has changed. First and foremost, I'd like to express my gratitude for everyone's kind remarks and advice. Your remarks helped me gain perspective and find the courage to speak up for myself and my sons. The CPS visit was 2 weeks ago and it went better than expected. Sarah, the social worker, was both compassionate and professional. She arrived early in the morning, right as I was preparing the boys for school. I was nervous, but I tried to appear normal for Ethan and Noah's sake. Sarah observed our morning routine, me making breakfast, well, pouring cereal, but hey, it was a healthy brand. Assisting the boys in packing their backpacks, and double-checking that Ethan had his inhaler. She appeared impressed by how well the boys behaved and how easily everything went. Sarah inspected our home after I dropped the boys off at school. I'll admit that it wasn't spotless. There were some dishes in the sink from the night before and toys scattered throughout the living room, but it was clean where it counted. No safety concerns, plenty of food in the fridge and clean clothes in the boys' wardrobes. I showed Sarah the boys' room, which still contains some of Mia's touches. She had created a woodland painting on one wall when the boys were toddlers. They adore it so much that I can't force myself to paint over it, even though it breaks my heart every time I see it. Sarah spotted the piano in the main area and inquired about it. I mentioned how Jen had been teaching the boys to play, but I didn't go into depth about our disagreement. I did add that music was important to Mia and that I was trying to keep that aspect of her alive for the boys. I had prepared a folder with crucial documents, including the boys' medical records, school reports, and even a detailed plan of our daily activities. I also have documents for my job search and financial preparations. Sarah appeared impressed with my organization and effort. During her visit, Sarah interviewed me about our current predicament. I was open about the obstacles I've faced as a single father, but I also highlighted all of my efforts. I told her about our family counseling sessions and how I've encouraged the boys to talk about their mother and their emotions. Sarah didn't inquire who wrote the CPS report, but she did ask whether anyone had any reservations about my parenting. I pondered before deciding to be honest. I recounted the scenario to Jen and Mia's parents, including my assumptions about who had made the report. Sarah declined to confirm or deny, however she did state that fraudulent reports are handled extremely seriously. Sarah called me about a week following our visit. She informed me that the case would be closed because there was no evidence of neglect or abuse. She also stated that they would be looking into the source of the report for any potential system misuse. I felt a great weight lifted off my shoulders. With that hurdle crossed, I resolved to confront Jen. I asked her over to chat while the boys were at a friend's house. She was clearly nervous when she came. We sat at the kitchen table, where she had startled me with her guardianship papers a month before. I carefully lay out everything. How her actions had affected me and the boys, my suspicions regarding the CPS report, and my next steps. I informed her that, while I appreciated her assistance in the beginning, her subsequent acts had crossed a boundary. Jen burst into tears, confirming that she had actually phoned CPS. She said she was concerned about the boys and believed she was doing the right thing. She mentioned how seeing me struggle reminded her of when Mia and I first started dating, and how protective she had been of her younger sister. I then told her that, while I realized she was also suffering, her behaviors were inappropriate. I stated that, for the time being, she would not be permitted unsupervised visits with the boys. She would only be able to view them if I was present. Jen did not take it well. She accused me of using the boys to punish her and threatened to sue for grandparents' rights on John and Linda's behalf. I held firm, warning her that any additional threats would result in her losing all contact with the boys. After Jen had left, I called John and Linda. I described everything that had transpired and my decision about Jen. To my surprise, they were more understanding than I anticipated. They admitted to being concerned, but later realized they had gone too far. They apologized for recommending that I give up custody and asked if we could work on repairing our relationship. We decided to start with brief, supervised visits. They came over last weekend, and it was fine. Not spectacular, but not bad either. The boys were delighted to meet their grandparents, and John and Linda appeared to make an effort to support rather than question my parenting choices. I've been honest with the boys about what's going on in an age-appropriate way. They miss their aunt, but they've shown incredible resilience. We've started attending a family counselor to assist us get through this difficult period. Noah confessed during our previous session that he sometimes feels upset at Mia for leaving us. It crushed my heart, but the counselor indicated it's a common reaction for children struggling with loss. On a good side, I was able to acquire a work-from-home position as a customer support representative for an online retailer. It's not ideal, and certainly not what I expected to accomplish with my education degree, but it allows me to be present for the boys while also earning a living. The hours are flexible, so I can work while the boys are in school and after they go to bed. I've also contacted out to other of Mia's former colleagues, who have been really sympathetic. Several of them have offered to serve as references for me, and one even assisted me in updating my resume. It's bittersweet. These are folks I used to see at corporate picnics and holiday parties, and now they're assisting me in finding work because Mia is no longer with us. It is still a battle. Every day I am overcome with emotion when I look at the boys and see Mia's eyes or grin, and it hits me all over again that she is no longer with us. But we're figuring out our new normal. Last night, as I was snuggling the boys into bed, Ethan asked if we could go to the park where Mia used to take them on Saturdays. It hurt, yet it felt good to recall those pleasant days. We're planning to go this weekend. I am more motivated than ever to be the father that Ethan and Noah deserve. Mia and I may not have prepared for this, but I am confident she would be pleased with how we are handling it. We'll be okay. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my previous update, and I wish I could say things had improved, but life seems determined to throw more problems at us. Jen reached out about a month ago to apologize. She explained that she had begun bereavement counseling and realized how improper her actions had been. She asked if we could begin mending our connection. I was cautious, but I agreed to let her observe the boys in supervised settings. We started with short visits to our residence. Jen would come over for supper once a week, and we'd play board games or watch movies together. It was awkward at first, but eventually things seemed more normal. The boys were overjoyed to have their aunt back in their life, especially since she started their piano lessons. Things were going nicely for a few weeks. Jen seemed to accept my boundaries, and there were times when I felt like we were reuniting as a family. She even helped me paint the boys' room. We preserved Mia's woodland mural while updating the rest of the walls to reflect the boys' current interests. But then, last week, everything crumbled again. I received a call from the boys' school in the middle of my work shift. Ethan experienced a severe asthma attack, and when they attempted to use his inhaler, they realized it was empty. I was horrified. I regularly check their inhalers and carry extras at school. I dashed to the school, my pulse racing the entire way. When I arrived, I found Jen in the nurse's office with Ethan. She was distraught, apologizing repeatedly. Ethan was pale and wobbly, but well. The school nurse was able to utilize a nebulizer to assist him with breathing. Jen had picked up the boys from school the day before, with my consent, and driven them to the park. Ethan had a slight episode, and they depleted his inhaler. Jen agreed to tell me so I could refill it, but she forgot. She was so embarrassed that she didn't say anything, hoping that I'd check it myself before the boys left for school. I was infuriated. Jen had not only endangered Ethan's life, but she had also violated my trust. In the heat of the moment, I informed her that she was no longer welcome in our life. I yelled some nasty things that I'm not proud of, but I was terrified and angry. The next day, I received a letter from an attorney. Jen and Mia's parents are seeking grandparents' rights and custody of the boys. They are saying that I am an unfit parent, citing the asthma event and the earlier CPS report as evidence. I am devastated and afraid. I cannot lose my boys. They are all I have left of Mia, and more significantly, they are my entire universe. I have called a family lawyer, and we are planning to fight this. But I'm worried. What if the judge thinks I'm an inadequate parent? What if they believe the boys will be better off with Jen and their grandparents? To make matters worse, my work-from-home job is faltering. The company is downsizing, and I'm concerned about losing my income just when I need it most for legal bills. I've started applying for various jobs, but it's difficult to find something that gives me the flexibility to care for the boys. The guys realize that something is wrong. They have been asking about Aunt Jen and why they are unable to see her. I'm trying to shelter them from the legal battle, but it's difficult. Noah has begun to have nightmares, and Ethan's asthma appears to be flaring up more frequently, most likely owing to stress. Last night, I discovered Noah sitting in Mia's old office, gazing at images of her on her computer. He asked me if Mommy would be upset with him for missing Aunt Jen. It broke my heart. I sat with him and we went through the images, discussing our greatest recollections of Mia. I told him that Mommy would never be mad at him for his sentiments, and that it's okay to miss someone even if we disagree with them. I feel like I'm failing them. I strive so hard to be both a mother and a father, to care for them financially and emotionally, but it never seems enough. I miss Mia more than ever. She would know how to manage it. She always knew exactly what to say to make things better. Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor, has been a godsend throughout this. She is a retired teacher who lives next door and has been helping me with the boys after school. She has offered to testify on my behalf if the custody matter proceeds to court. It means a lot to know that someone notices how hard I try. I'm not giving up, however. These are my guys, and I will fight with everything I have to keep our family together. I only hope this is enough. Update 3. It has been 6 weeks since my last update, and I'm relieved to report that things have finally improved. The custody struggle between Jen and Mia's parents went to court. It was a tough process that took several days. I had to sit there and listen while Jen and her lawyer branded me as an unfit parent, pointing out every mistake I had made since Mia's death. They discussed the asthma incident, the CPS report, and times when I had been late picking up the boys from school due to work. But my lawyer was fantastic. She helped me remain cool and presented our argument effectively. We had character witnesses, Mrs. Rodriguez, the boys' teachers, and even some of Mia's former co-workers, who testified to how involved I am in the boys' lives, how they are always clean, well-fed and happy. Mrs. Rodriguez's testimony was quite moving. She mentioned overhearing me reading to the boys every night, even when I was fatigued from work, and how she frequently observed us playing in the backyard or doing homework together. We also had evidence of all of my efforts, such as documentation of our therapy sessions, the boys' improved grades, and even a notebook I'd kept to chronicle Ethan's asthma symptoms and treatments. The turning point came when the judge requested to talk with Ethan and Noah alone. I was nervous, but I was confident the boys would tell the truth. When they came out, Noah went up to me and hugged me tightly. The judge did not tell me what they said, but her eyes shone with new comprehension. In the end, the judge decided in my favor. She stated that, while I'm not perfect, I am a dedicated father who does his best in difficult circumstances. She chastised Jen and my in-laws for attempting to bully me through the judicial system rather than working together to benefit the boys. The judge ordered Jen and Mia's parents to come to family counseling with us if they want to keep their contact with the boys. They agreed, and we have had 2 sessions thus far. It's been tense, but I'm hoping we can rebuild trust for the benefit of the boys. On the work front, I received unexpected excellent news. One of Mia's former co-workers contacted her with a job offer. It's an entry-level employment at the tech business Mia previously worked for, with flexible hours and the ability to work from home as needed. The compensation is significantly more than my current employment and there is possibility for advancement. I start next month and am both excited and nervous. The guys are doing better too. We've settled into a good pattern and they're becoming more honest about their feelings. Last week, Noah said he was proud of me for fighting the bad guys in court. It made me realize that, despite my efforts to insulate them, they know more than I give them credit for. We still have terrible days. Sometimes I reach for my phone to text me about something hilarious the boys did only to realize she's gone. The boys still grieve when they mourn their mother, but we are learning to navigate this new normal together. I understand we have a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in a long time, I am optimistic about our future. Mia would be proud of how far we've come, and I'm determined to keep going for the boys and her memory. Thank you for your continued support along this journey. Your wisdom and nice words have been a lifeline at the most difficult times. We'll be okay. Am I the asshole for telling my sister I don't know if I love her after finding out about her 5-year affair? Original post. My sister, 32, moved in with me because she got pregnant 5 months ago from what she claimed was a one-night stand. I love my sister, so of course, I took her in. My husband is overseas for 6 more months, so it was nice to have her around because I care about her very much. On Monday, I came home and saw my sister and a strange woman in a screaming match on my doorstep. I obviously didn't know what was happening, but I saw the woman poking my pregnant sister's shoulder, so I intervened. I sent my sister inside, and she begged me to send the woman away. I didn't understand what was going on, but I wanted the altercation to end for everyone's sake, so I told the woman as much. Then she started screaming, asking me if I was also sleeping with her husband. I was like. And then she basically revealed that my sister had been having an affair with her husband for 5 years. 5 years. She had everything printed out, chats, photos, emails, receipts. It was disturbing to see, and I didn't want to go through it all. But a few things were established. My sister knew about his wife. She knew she was the mistress and liked it. This woman was a stay-at-home mom to their 4 kids, one of whom has a severe disability from a car accident. Her husband knew about my sister's pregnancy and even took her on a baby moon to celebrate it. The affair had been going on the entire time, with my sister believing he would eventually leave his wife for her. My sister had fully embraced the role of being the other woman, and was emotionally invested in their relationship, despite his repeated lies about leaving his wife. I told the woman I was very sorry and that I obviously didn't know, but I asked her to leave because this wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't want the neighbors to call the police. She was furious but gave me her number on a post-it, begging me not to let her husband stay at my house. I assured her that no man was stepping foot in my home. My sister was begging me not to believe the woman, calling her a vindictive ex-wife. I told her, all right then, let's look up the marriage online. Let's see if a motion for dissolution of marriage was ever submitted. We fought hard. My sister kept saying I would never understand and that they loved each other, but he just couldn't leave his wife, blah blah blah. I called her dumb and naive. The next day, I told her she could stay here because I didn't want her to become a financial burden on that woman in any way, but I also told her that right now, I didn't want to engage with her. My sister asked me if I still loved her, and I told her honestly, right now, I can't say I do. I will always help my nephew and not endanger you, but I can't like you because you've shown me you're not a trustworthy person. I told her I didn't trust her not to try anything with my husband, and I didn't trust her with anything at all, so I made her sign a tenants agreement. She's been begging me to forgive her, and I told her there's nothing to forgive. I just don't know who she is anymore. AITA some of OOP's comments. Commenter, NTA, you need to make sure she is out of your home before your husband comes home, because you are right, you cannot trust her. OP, I wouldn't worry. I trust my husband 100%. Not my sister anymore though. I already told him and asked if she ever did something and he said no. Commenter, NTA, your sister's behavior was vile and inexcusable. That poor woman and her children. Her husband is an absolute POS. OP, I said the affair started 5 years ago, right? Now guess when she wife and the kid got into an accident that left the kid disabled. Commenter, and your sister knew? She's a despicable person and I'm amazed how strong you are for still keeping her housed with you. NTA OOP. She met the flicking kids. Took them to the zoo with the bastard. Commenter. Wow, that is severely ballsy. OOP. She wanted them to get to know her so she could hop right into the mom role as soon as he divorced his wife. Yeah right. OOP's parents. They died 7 years ago. Commenter. You should ask for pics so you know what this guy looks like, and arrange to get outdoor cameras at the least so your sis isn't sneaking him around when you're at work. It should be grounds for eviction if she does allow him around. OOP. I saw him in the pictures his wife showed me. Also I work from home ATM. So no dice why OOP lets her live with OOP. One of my reasons is that I don't want her to get an apartment on his dime when that money should go to his kids. Also, my nephew doesn't deserve to be born homeless. OOP expands. She pays me no rent. So if he gives her money there is nothing that I can do. but living on his dime in an apartment he would pay for and possibly put in his name. Dangerous. Commenter. Just curious, what does your husband say about this situation? OOP. He said that it is very disappointing she turned out to be like that and said that it is difficult to trust her as she proved to be such a good liar. She is the one who helped me with the tenancy agreement and all. Commenter. Downvoted? Yeah, that whole thing might just be so that she has tenant rights so that she can try to ruin your fucking life. OP. Listen, you don't know which country I'm from. We got legal help and did this together with someone that actually has a clue. We saved our asses like this. If not that, would be akin to squatters' rights in the US. Commenter. OP. What are you going to do once the baby is here? Assuming the dad wants to be in the kid's life at least somewhat, I think it's unreasonable to ban him from the house. OOP. If she wants him there, she can get her very own apartment. If she still wants to stay and save up for the baby, she has to adhere to my house rules. She is free to go and see an outside. To another commenter. I put up my rules. If she wants to stay, she has to adhere to them. She has been told. She still has 4 months to make that decision. If she wants him physically with her after birth, she can do that. But not in my house. How the wife got OOP's address. She got the address from BIS phone update post. First, I'd like to clarify a few things. I am not going to tell my sister to get rid of the baby. That's not my place, and I would never suggest such a thing. Also, I am not going to install tracking software on her phone or demand access to all her devices. That's invasive and wrong. I've been thinking a lot, and while I can't say that I don't love my sister, it's very hard to feel that love right now. I don't know who she is anymore. It's not just that she lied to me, it's what she did and how convinced she is that she was justified because they were in love. She's brought chaos into my home that I opened up to her. I'm deeply disappointed in her, and I just don't like her at the moment. I'm letting her stay with me because I don't want her to become dependent on him. I don't think he's a good man either, and as a social worker, I've seen these scenarios too many times. My sister is already deluded. I don't need to open the door to a dependency that's also financial. Now, on to the update. I haven't been punishing my sister, but I've been treating her like a roommate. This is driving her crazy. She's begging me to go back to how things were before, but I can't. I told her that I need time and that things can't just return to normal overnight. She tried to explain how it all happened. She admitted that she always knew he was married but believed she could tell how unhappy he was and felt he deserved to be happy. They met at a bar a few weeks after his son's accident. He told her that his wife hadn't touched him since it happened and that he was about to explode. I asked her why she would involve herself with a married man, knowing the hurt it would cause. She said she wanted to be a wife and a good mom, and that included his kids. She had hoped he would divorce his wife so they could all move on and finally be happy together. I just stared at her, unable to comprehend how she could rationalize her actions. A few days later, he appeared at our house, claiming he had left his wife and wanted to be with my sister. I told him to leave immediately or I would call the police. My sister was furious with me, accusing me of ruining her chance at happiness. I made it clear to her. If he comes over again, I will evict her. She's free to date anyone she wants, but not under my roof. I also told her that if she plans to have him around after the baby is born, she'll need to find her own place. Word has gotten around our community about the affair. While we were grocery shopping, a woman even spat on my sister. Many of her friends have cut ties with her, calling her a homewrecker. Some are married themselves and don't want her near their husbands. I haven't said I told you so even once. We unexpectedly ran into his wife at a local cafe. My sister wanted to apologize and suggested that maybe they could all have a good relationship for the sake of the kids. The wife laughed coldly and said, "You made your choices, now live with them. Don't expect me to make this easier for you." My sister is devastated and has been lying in bed ever since. I'm taking care of her physical needs, making sure she eats, stays hydrated and attends her prenatal appointments, but I can't bring myself to comfort her emotionally. I just don't have it in me right now. OOP's comments. Commenter. Is your sister mentally sound? She seems to be living in a fantasy world. NTAOOP, I don't think she is having a psychotic break. I think she is in too far, and now that she has destroyed her life, she is trying to make it work. Commenter. To get in this far she can't be a good person, and neither can he. They're both so insanely selfish that they put getting laid over destroying his kid's family and home. I feel horribly for that child, its parents are trash. OOP. That has also been my thoughts. Commenter. I asked the last time and wasn't answered. How did your sister make it to like 32, IARC, and wasn't living with you? Was she working? Why did she immediately stop working the second she found out she was pregnant? If she didn't, why did she give up her apartment and move in with you? A 32 years old living alone had some way to support herself, and people don't just quit their jobs overnight because they got pregnant unless it's because they are in a stable relationship and the partner was willing to support them, in which case again moving in with you would not be necessary. You talk about not being financially dependent on him, but now she's financially dependent on you? Why would you agree to allow her to become financially dependent on you, and why would you accept the cost of caring for an adult and her child just because it's your sister? If she is not working, she should absolutely not have the kid, and you should absolutely not be bearing the brunt of her bad decisions. OP, I had quite a few, so I don't believe I read yours. Or at least not fully. I answered someone who asked something similar. Yes, she has a job. She moved in with me to save up for her baby. She is on maternity leave. Her job is not super high paying. I am not responding to the rest of the comment as it seems more aggressive than helpful. To a downvoted comment saying that's not how maternity leave works in the US, good thing we are not in the US. Neither the UK. To another, ruder commenter. Yeah, you get 100% of the pay for 6 months, after that 80% or something like that for 6 more months, and I think 50% if you go over a year. Also notice how I said not super high paying. Commenter, I was spit on multiple times growing up because I was a bastard. I received a lot of hate because my brother was an unwed teen mom. Random people, teachers, churchgoers, a good chunk of the so-called family. Small towns suck more than I can say. OP, they go pretty hard in the name of Jesus. Hypocrites of you ask me when asked where OP lives, I won't say. But we are quite religious here. Old women think they are the law and all that. Commenter, holy shit, someone spit on her? What are you people, Amish? OP. Catholic commenter. He appeared at our house, claiming he had left his wife and wanted to be with my sister. Sure, he left his wife after 5 years, coincidentally at the moment she discovered everything. I'm completely sure it's not the wife who dumped him. Per SOOP. I think the same thing. Commenter, your sister really is a piece of work. What did she expect would happen once news of the affair got out? If it weren't for the fact that she's pregnant, I wouldn't have put it past someone to do more than spit at her. The child is going to grow up hated by affair partners, soon to be ex and their children. OOP, I think worse is coming to her. I know our town. That's why she mostly stays in right now. Someone alleges OOP is only blaming the sister and not the affair partner. I blame him. He is a horrible man with no morals. He couldn't even wait for his son to be out of the hospital to start an affair because his ballpark wasn't getting scratched by his wife, who was also in the accident. I hate him. I hate him so badly that I resent that he exists. But he is not in my life. I didn't know him. He has no cards in my game. I am so mad at my sister for not fucking up her life but also bringing chaos in mine after I opened my home to her. I am mad she lied to me for 5 years, but most of all, I am disgusted with her horrible selfish actions. She wasn't lured into this. She knew from the beginning that she was a mistress. She knew what she was doing. She knew it was wrong, and yet she kept doing it and lying through her teeth. I don't know who she is. New update. Post, my sister just won't stop talking about him. Every day it's the same story. Their perfect future together, the apartment they're moving into, how everything will be great once his divorce is done. She's completely lost in this delusion, acting like none of the lies and betrayal matter. I can't stand it. She made him write me letters. Yes, actual letters. As if that's going to magically make me approve of him. She leaves them around the house, thinking that if I just read them, I'll suddenly understand how sorry he is and how much he loves her. I haven't responded to a single one. It's ridiculous. I told her over and over that I don't want anything to do with him, but she keeps pushing, as if she can wear me down. It's beyond frustrating. Then came the talk of moving in together. She sat me down and asked for my blessing, telling me how important it was to her that I support their relationship. She actually wanted me to meet him, to give him a chance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's when I drew the line. I told her flat out, if she moves in with him, I'm done. I told her I would go low contact, that I wouldn't be part of their life and that she's on her own if she goes through with this. If she wanted my support, she had to leave him, full stop. For a moment, I thought she was finally getting it. She showed me screenshots from his ex-wife. The ex had pretended she wanted him back, and this guy fell for it immediately. He told her how much he missed her. How my sister was a mistake. How he wanted to fix things with his family. My sister was crushed. She came to me with the screenshots, crying, and I thought, for a couple of days, that maybe, just maybe, She would finally see him for who he really is. I was hopeful. But then, as usual, he wormed his way back in. He told her he only said those things because he was afraid his ex would take the kids away. And of course, she bought it. Now she's actively moving in with him, packing up her things and making all these plans like nothing happened. The screenshots. Forgotten. The lies. Excused. She's determined to be with him no matter what, and I'm done. I told her I'm not helping her anymore. No more driving her to appointments. No more checking on her. Nothing. I'm not going to pretend everything's okay while she's diving headfirst into this disaster. Now I barely talk to her. If she asks where the tea is, I'll tell her. If she wants to know if there's milk left, I'll answer. But that's it. I'm emotionally cut off, and I told her straight. I'll be here if things fall apart, if she's in danger, but I am not going to be a part of this train wreck. She's on her own now. The community backlash hasn't slowed down either. Everywhere we go, people are whispering, staring and judging. They're not just looking at her, they're looking at me too. People know she's living with me, and I've started hearing comments at work about why I haven't completely cut her off. It's affecting my life now, and I just can't carry her mistakes anymore. Her friends? All gone. The ones who were married have cut ties completely. She's isolated herself, but instead of waking up, she's clinging harder to him. Holding on to this fantasy that everything will work out. But I'm done caring. She's made her choice, and now she has to live with the fallout. This is the final update because I'm finished. I'm done trying, done caring, done dealing with the mess she's made. She can have her life with him, but I'm not going to be part of it. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter, NTA. Let her be, kick her out sooner. This started to affect your life more than her. OOP. She is leaving by the 23rd latest. To another commenter. Contracts have been terminated. She is out by the 23rd commenter. She'll lose him as she got him. You'll hear from her in the future when he cheats on her. OOP. I give it 3 months. Commenter. I don't blame you for being over this whole mess. As my mom would say, I won't be shitting out what you eat. Meaning, the consequences of your sister's actions are for her and her alone to deal with. You've been a good sister and done all you can to make her see the error of her ways. Now you just have to let the chips fall where they may. I'm nosy, can you come back and tell us her sob story when she comes crawling back? Oop, I like that idiom. I don't know. Maybe if I need to vent. But I hope that this is the last of my involvement. Commenter. Yeah, last update I predicted things wouldn't change and she would just start affecting you too, and now even indirectly she's affecting you socially. So I know she's not gonna leave without you kicking her out. Hopefully you see that sooner than later. Good luck. OP. I think she is thrilled about leaving to finally be with him. LOL. Commenter. I knew a woman like OP's sister. The man never left his wife. He never got a place with the woman I knew. She's alone, he's still with his wife. OOP. I don't think his wife is taking him back. Commenter. NTA. Your sister is reaching rock bottom, it's now up to her to get out or go further down. It's pathetic she can't face reality, maybe because she intentionally lost everything and everyone because of her selfish choices. For your sake it's best to maintain low to no contact. OOP. It's sad for my nephew. But he has 2 parents now. I am concentrated on my life now. OOP's final thoughts. Commenter. When it happens come back and tell us please. I want to see how things will fall apart. Don't delete your account, keep just for this, please. OP. I don't think I will. People are seriously unkind. I just got 2 death threats from my DMs. One for being a shifty sister and the other for housing a homewrecker. My family kicked me out because my sister falsely accused me of stealing her engagement ring. 3 years later, they discovered it in the garbage disposal. I never imagined I'd be telling this story, but here goes. I'm Elliot, 26 years old, and 3 years ago my life was flipped upside down by a false charge made by my older sister, Gemma, 29. I grew up in a little Ohio town with my parents, John, 55M, and Lisa, 53F, and my sister, Gemma. We lived in a modest 2-story house that my parents purchased when they first married. It was not fancy, but it was home. My father worked as a high school math teacher, and my mother was a nurse at the local hospital. They weren't wealthy, but they made sure we got all we needed. Growing up, Gemma and I were quite close. We'd spend hours playing in our backyard, climbing the ancient oak tree and inventing complicated games. She was always the leader, making up the rules and plots, while I was content to follow along. As we grew older, however, things began to alter. Gemma was always an overachiever. She was the top of her class, captain of the debate team, and appeared to thrive in whatever she tried. In contrast, I was more laid back. I performed okay in school, but I was never as motivated as Gemma. As we approached our adolescence, this disparity began to erode our relationship. By the time Gemma left for college, we had grown apart. She attended a prominent university on a scholarship, whilst I stayed local and attended community college. I didn't know what I wanted to accomplish with my life, so I took a range of classes to figure it out. Gemma relocated to the city after graduating from college and began working at a large marketing agency. She'd return home for holidays and occasional weekends, full of stories about her fascinating life and excellent profession. I couldn't help feeling inferior in contrast. I was still living at home, working part-time at the local grocery shop, and trying to figure out my next step. Despite our differences, I always assumed Gemma and I were fine. We weren't as close as we were, but I assumed it was just part of growing up. I had no idea how quickly everything might fall apart. Gemma and her boyfriend, Tom, 31M, were engaged 3 years ago. They had been dating for 2 years, and everyone was ecstatic. Tom was a lawyer from a wealthy family, and my parents idolized him. He proposed with a stunning diamond ring that has been in his family for generations. Gemma was overjoyed and couldn't stop showing it off to everyone. The engagement celebration was a large occasion. My parents brought what seemed like the entire town to our house to celebrate. I recall feeling a little out of place among the rich people Gemma and Tom had invited from the city. I remained close to my old high school pals who were still in town, feeling more at ease with them than with Gemma's sophisticated set. A month after the engagement, all hell broke out. It was Tuesday afternoon and I had the day off work. I was in my room, playing video games and enjoying the quiet house. Gemma was visiting for a week, taking some time off work to begin arranging the wedding with our mother. I heard Gemma return home from a shopping trip with Mom. They were talking and laughing downstairs. I didn't think much about it and returned to my game. Around an hour later, I heard Gemma scream. I ran downstairs to check what was going on, and she accused me of taking her engagement ring. She explained that she took it off while doing dishes and left it on the kitchen counter. When she returned to grab it, it was gone. I was stunned and quickly denied taking it, but Gemma refused to listen. She kept shrieking that I was the only other one in the home, so it must have been me. She mentioned how I was always jealous of her success and how I probably wanted to sell the ring so I could finally move out and accomplish something with my life. Our parents arrived home in the midst of the chaos, and Gemma recounted her version of events. To my horror, they believed her wholeheartedly. My mother began to cry, questioning how I could have done such a thing to my own sister. My father merely looked at me with disappointment in his eyes. They began searching my room and turned everything upside down. They didn't find the ring, but they did discover some money I had saved from my job at the supermarket. It wasn't much, maybe a few hundred, but Gemma quickly picked up on it, claiming I must have sold the ring and that's where the money came from. I tried to explain that I had been saving for months and was considering taking some classes at the local community college, but no one listened. The following few days were a nightmare. My parents and Gemma repeatedly pressed me to confess and return the ring. They threatened to contact the police if I did not come clean. I was afraid and felt entirely alone. Nobody in my family believed me, and I was treated like a criminal in my own home. I tried contacting several of my pals, but the majority of them had moved away after high school. The few who remained in town appeared unwilling to become engaged in family strife. I felt more alone than ever. After a week of relentless accusations and threats, my parents made a decision that would alter my life forever. They told me I needed to go. They said they couldn't trust me longer and that I was putting shame on the family. They gave me 2 days to pack my belongings and leave. I was devastated. I had nowhere to go and didn't know what to do. My best buddy from high school, Ryan, 26M, who had recently returned to town after serving in the army, offered to let me rest on his couch for a time. But I knew I couldn't stay there long. His apartment was small, and he was still getting back on his feet. I packed everything I could into a backpack and an old duffel bag, including clothes, books, my laptop, and a few memories from brighter times. As I was leaving, I noticed Gemma eyeing me from her old bedroom window. I thought I caught a glint of doubt in her eyes, but she quickly turned aside. Walking out of that house, the only one I'd ever known, was the most difficult thing I had ever done. I felt deceived and abandoned by those who were supposed to love me completely. The saddest part was that I had done nothing wrong. For the next 2 months, I alternated between Ryan's couch and cheap motels as I could afford them. I took on any odd jobs I could find to make ends meet. I've worked as a dishwasher, dog walker, and even spent a few weeks on a construction job. It was a challenge, but I was determined to prove my innocence and succeed on my own. Eventually, I got a solid job at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. The job was hard, the hours were long, but the pay was consistent. The salary wasn't spectacular, but it allowed me to rent a modest room in a shared house with some other warehouse workers. I gradually began rebuilding my life, but the grief of what had happened never went away. I'd lie awake at night, repeating the events in my memory and wondering how they had gone so wrong. How could my family have turned against me so quickly? How could Gemma, who had grown up with me and knew me better than anyone else, believe I would do such a thing? I cut all communication with my family. They attempted to contact me several times in the beginning. My mother would leave heartfelt voicemails urging me to come home and make things right. My father sent a few terse text messages indicating we needed to discuss. Gemma did show up at the warehouse once, but I declined to see her. I couldn't bear to speak with them after what they had done. They were no longer my family. For 3 years this was how I lived. I made new friends at work and in my shared home. We'd hang out after shifts, drink beer, and watch games. It wasn't the life I had envisioned for myself, but it was mine, and I had created it from scratch. I worked hard and was even promoted to shift supervisor at the warehouse. I started attending online classes to learn business management. I was slowly deciding what I wanted to accomplish with my life, but there was always a part of me that was outraged and wounded by what had occurred. I missed my previous life and family, but I couldn't forgive them for not believing me. Every holiday season was challenging. When I saw families shopping together or heard Christmas music, I felt a sense of sadness for what I had lost. Then last week, I received an unexpected email from my father. The subject line simply stated, "We need to talk." The message was brief, stating that they needed to meet with me immediately and that it was regarding the ring incident. At first, I was tempted to dismiss it as I did with all of their previous attempts to reach me. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe a small part of me still wanted a conclusion. After arguing with myself for hours, I decided to listen to them. I called my father, and what he said left me stunned. The ring had been found. Gemma had accidentally knocked it into the garbage disposal while doing the dishes. She only recognized this a few days ago, when the disposal began making unusual noises and they summoned a plumber to inspect it. My father claimed Gemma was upset when she understood what had transpired and that I had been telling the truth all along. He stated they all felt bad about what they had done to me and wanted to make things right. I hung up the phone, experiencing a swirl of emotions. On the one hand, I felt vindicated. I had always told the truth and now everyone knew it. However, I was angry. I was outraged that it took 3 years to find out the truth, that I had missed so much time with my family, and that I had fought alone for so long when I had done nothing wrong. Now I'm at a crossroads. My family wants me to return home, they claim they want to make things right. Gemma has been phoning and messaging nonstop, asking for forgiveness. But I'm not certain I can forgive them. They pushed me out without hesitation. Chose to think the worst of me, and left me to fend for myself for 3 years. Part of me wants to send them all to hell and let them deal with the shame of what they did to me. But another part of me misses my previous life and wonders whether there is a way to rebuild what we've lost. I do not know what to do. Should I give them an opportunity to make amends, or should I continue living the life I've created for myself without them? I'm torn and could appreciate some outside insight on this whole situation. Update 1. It's been a week since my previous post, and a lot has happened. I'd want to thank everyone for their advice and support. It truly helped me go through my emotions and figure out what to do. After much debate, I chose to meet with my family. I believed I owed it to myself to confront them and seek closure, even if I wasn't convinced about reconciliation. We decided to meet in a neutral site, a modest coffee shop in the next town over. I chose it because it was far enough from our hometown that we wouldn't run across anyone we knew, yet close enough that anyone could get there without too much effort. I was quite nervous on the day of the meeting. I hadn't seen my family in 3 years, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I arrived at the coffee shop early and chose a table in the corner where we could enjoy some solitude. When they walked in, it was like a hit in the belly. Seeing them after 3 years was intense. My mother burst into tears the moment she saw me. She was older than I remembered, with more gray hair and creases around her eyes. My father appeared weary and tired, his shoulders drooping as if he were carrying a huge weight. Gemma couldn't look me in the eye at first. She appeared smaller and less confident than the sister I recalled. We sat down, and for a time, no one knew what to say. They all started talking at once, with apologies falling out. My parents said they had failed as parents by not trusting me and kicking me out. They admitted that they had regretted their decision every day since, but pride and humiliation had prevented them from reaching out sooner. My father, who had always been a man of few words, talked for hours about how he had repeated those days in his head, trying to figure out how he could have been so blind. He claimed he had always prided himself on being fair and reasonable, but that emotion had clouded his judgment when it counted the most. My mother, through tears, told me how she had preserved my room exactly as I had left it, hoping that one day I would return. She stated she would wake up in the middle of the night, thinking she had heard me coming home, only to realize what had transpired. Gemma burst into tears, stating she would never forgive herself for accusing me and damaging our relationship. She mentioned how she had always looked up to me when we were youngsters, even though I was younger. She admitted that she had been so preoccupied with her own life and troubles that she had lost sight of what was truly important. As they talked, memories of our childhood came flooding back. I remembered how Gemma stuck up for me when I was bullied in middle school. I reflected on all the times we had laughed together, exchanged secrets, and supported each other during difficult times. It made the betrayal hurt even more, but it also reminded me of the fantastic times we'd had. I heard everything they said, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive them just yet. The anguish and resentment from the previous 3 years were still too raw. I informed them that I needed time to comprehend things. They appeared to comprehend and did not push for more. My mom wanted to hug me before we went, but I backed away. I wasn't prepared for that kind of closeness yet. The hurt look on her face almost convinced me to change my decision, but I remained firm. I needed to protect myself emotionally. After the meeting, I returned to my apartment and carefully considered what I wanted. Did I want to go back to my previous life? Can I ever trust them again? Was it worth attempting to repair our relationship? I recognized that, while I missed having a family, I had also developed significantly in the previous 3 years. I had become self-sufficient, robust, and had created a life for myself from scratch. I wasn't the same person they'd kicked out 3 years before. I reflected about my warehouse work, my online education, and the friends I'd made. I had worked hard to reach where I was, and I was pleased with what I had accomplished on my own. The thought of abandoning that and returning to my old life felt awful. At the same time, I couldn't deny that seeing my family had triggered a variety of feelings. Despite everything, I still loved and missed them. I wondered if I could have a relationship with them while still keeping my independence. After a few days of deliberation, I reached a decision. I called my parents and explained that while I appreciated their apology, I was not yet ready to fully reconcile. I informed them that I needed more time and space to heal. I also established some boundaries. I indicated I was willing to maintain minimal contact with them, but I wasn't going back home or pretending nothing had occurred. I told them that if we were to continue our connection, it had to be on my terms. They expressed disappointment but said they understood. They promised to respect my boundaries and allow me the time I needed. My mother asked if she might phone me once a week to check in, and I agreed, assuming it would be a nice approach to gradually re-establish trust. As for Gemma, I've decided to keep my distance for now. Her actions had affected me the most, and I wasn't ready to forgive her just yet. I told her I needed more time before I could consider having another relationship with her. She was upset, but explained that she understood and would wait until I was ready. It's been a rough week, with many emotional highs and lows. I've had moments when I questioned my decision, wondering if I'm being too harsh or if I'm passing up an opportunity to reunite with my family. But then I recall how quickly they turned on me, and I realize I'm doing the right thing by taking things slowly. I've also started researching therapeutic possibilities. Many of you suggested it in the comments, and I believe it would be beneficial to have a professional to speak with while I navigate this tricky situation. I've never been to therapy before, so I'm a little nervous, but I think it could be beneficial to me. For the time being, my primary focus is on my job and studies. I have a huge project coming up at work, and I'm determined not to let all of this family drama distract me from my goals. I am also thinking about moving to a better apartment. I've been saving, and I think I'm ready for a place of my own without roommates. Thank you again for your support. It's comforting to know that there are individuals out there who understand and care, even if we've never met. I'll provide an update if anything substantial changes. Update 2. It's been almost a month since my last update, and I'd like to share some developments. I've been sticking to the boundaries I've established with my family. We've had a few phone calls and text messages, but nothing particularly intense. It's been okay, awkward at times, but not as painful as I expected. My parents have mostly respected my wishes. They check in every now and then, but they don't ask for more than I'm prepared to provide. I can tell they are working hard to rebuild trust, but it is a slow process. My mother calls once a week, as we promised. These calls were strained at first, with extended silences, but they are becoming easier. We usually discuss neutral issues, such as her employment at the hospital, the weather, and my online education. It's not much, but it's a beginning. My father has been sending me short emails, usually simply to check in or share something he thinks I'd be interested in. Last week, he forwarded me an article about a new business launching in our hometown. It was a little gesture, but it reminded me of how he would clip newspaper stories for me. When I was younger, Gemma struggled with the barrier I'd created between us. She sent me many long, emotional texts apologizing and pleading for the opportunity to make things right. I responded simply, stating that I need more time. It's difficult, but I'm holding firm on this. I know she's hurting, but I'm not prepared to deal with her feelings on top of mine. The big news is that I have started treatment. I discovered a counselor that specializes in family trauma, and we've had a few sessions thus far. It has been difficult to bring up all of the grief from the past, but I believe it is helping. My therapist is assisting me in resolving my anger and trust issues, as well as providing me with strategies for setting good boundaries. In our last session, we discussed how the incident with the ring was more than just the accusation, but also years of feeling like I didn't measure up to Gemma's accomplishments. It's made me recognize that there were difficulties in our family dynamic long before the ring incident and that healing will require addressing those as well. One unanticipated result of all of this is that I've become closer to my pals, particularly Ryan. They've been extremely supportive throughout the entire ordeal. Ryan even offered to accompany me to any future family meetings for moral support. It's taught me that family is more than just blood. It's about who supports you when things go rough. Work has been a welcome distraction. I've poured myself into my career and even received a modest promotion. I'm now in charge of inventory management for my shift, which means additional responsibility and a minor pay increase. It is nice to have something pleasant to focus on. In terms of my living situation, I've decided to stay where I am for the time being. It's not much, but it's mine and symbolizes the independence I've worked so hard for. My parents offered to help me find a better place, but I declined. I have to do this on my own. However, I began to carefully consider choices for furthering my studies. A state institution located approximately an hour distant provides night classes. I am considering applying to their business program. It would be a significant move, but I believe I'm prepared for it. Overall, I'm taking it one day at a time. Certain days are harder than others. There are times when I mourn our easy connection as a family, but then I recall how fast they turned on me, and I realize I can't rush this process. My therapist thinks it's good to have mixed feelings about everything. She encourages me to be patient with myself and not feel obligated to forgive before I'm ready. We're working on techniques for dealing with upcoming family gatherings and holidays, which are making me more apprehensive than I'd like to admit. For the time being, my priorities are recovering and creating a life I can be proud of, with or without my family. It's not easy, but I'm positive about the future. I'm learning that it's all right to put myself first, and that creating boundaries does not make me a horrible person. Thank you for your continuing support. Your comments and messages have provided me with strength during this process. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in coping with familial issues like these. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my original post, so I thought it was time for a last update. A lot has changed during the last few months. The biggest news is that I've decided to relocate to a different place in search of a new employment opportunity. It's a significant advancement in my profession, and I'm looking forward to the new opportunities. The job is with a logistics company, and the work is comparable to what I did at the warehouse, but on a much larger size. It's a management role, which I've been working toward for a while. The income is much higher than what I was making previously, and it includes benefits such as health insurance and a 401k plan. Before making this decision, I had a lengthy conversation with my therapist. We talked about how this move will influence my healing process and my relationship with my family. Finally, we agreed that this could be a good thing for me, an opportunity to fully stand on my own 2 feet and identify myself outside of the family drama. I informed my parents about the transfer last week. They were astonished and disappointed, yet they expressed their understanding. My mother cried a little, stating she had hoped we'd have more time to restore our relationship before my departure. My father was more stoic, but I could see he was disappointed too. They were both concerned about me being alone in a strange place, but I told them that I'd be okay. Gemma took it the hardest. After I told her, she showed up unannounced to my flat, pleading with me not to go. She admitted that she felt like she was losing me all over again. It was a challenging conversation, but I held my ground. I informed her that this was something I needed to do for myself, and that our relationship was not in a position where her opinion could influence my decision. Our relationship is improving, but it is not perfect. We've enjoyed several family dinners in recent months. They've been uncomfortable and awkward at times, but we're gradually learning to be around each other again. Trust is still a major issue. I sometimes question their motives, wondering if they truly believe what they say or if they are simply attempting to relieve their guilt. My therapist has been crucial throughout this. She has helped me analyze my emotions and create boundaries. She has emphasized that forgiveness does not imply forgetting or pretending that the trauma never happened. It's about letting go of my anger in order to find peace of mind. I've taken that to heart. While I don't believe I'll ever forget what happened, I'm attempting to forgive my family. Not for their sake, but for mine. It was hard to carry around all of my anger and bitterness, and I'm ready to let it go. As I prepare for this relocation, I've been thinking about everything that has transpired. 3 years ago, I thought my life was finished. I'd lost everything, including everyone I cared about. But now I see how much I've learned from that experience. I'm stronger, more independent, and have a better understanding of my own worth than I ever had. I don't know what the future holds for me and my family. We intend to stay in touch once I relocate, with weekly phone calls and visits during the holidays. It's a start. Perhaps, with time and distance, we will be able to create something new. For the time being, my attention is focused on the future. I'm excited about my new work, the new city, and the opportunities that await me. I've started looking for apartments online and researched the region where I'll be residing. It's a mix of excitement and trepidation, but I'm largely looking forward to this next chapter in my life. Whatever happens to my family, I'm confident I'll be okay. I've shown to myself that I can deal with whatever life throws at me, and I've learned the value of surrounding myself with people that believe in and support me, whether they're related or not. My mill threatened court if I didn't give custody of my daughter to my sister-in-law, accusing me of being an irresponsible parent. I, 35, am a single father to my 3-year-old daughter, Lily. My wife Sarah died 2 years ago from cancer. It was a sad loss for both me and Lily, but we've been working hard to move on and build a happy life together. My mother-in-law, Karen, 58F, recently approached me with a stunning request. She requested that I transfer custody of Lily to Sarah's younger sister, Emily, 30F, and her husband John, 32M. Karen reasoned that Lily required a proper family with a mother figure, and Emily and John were better qualified to raise her. This request caught me completely off guard. Lily is my daughter, and since Sarah died, I've done everything I can to provide her with a loving and secure environment. I've altered my work schedule to be more present, hired a part-time babysitter to assist when I'm at work, and ensured Lily has lots of playdates and activities to keep her engaged and happy. When I denied Karen's plea, saying that I had no intention of relinquishing custody of my own child, she became upset. She accused me of being selfish and not considering what was best for Lily. I attempted to remain cool and maintained that I was fully capable of raising my daughter, but Karen refused to listen. Karen threatened to take me to court, which inflamed the situation. She claimed to have evidence that I was an inadequate parent and that she would use it to obtain custody of Lily for Emily and John. Her threats astonished and wounded me, especially since I've always attempted to have a positive connection with Sarah's family for Lily's sake. I asked Karen what kind of evidence she allegedly possessed, but she declined to elaborate. She just kept saying that Lily would be better off with Emily and John, and that I was robbing her of the opportunity for a regular family life. I held firm and assured Karen that I would resist any attempts to take Lily away from me. I informed her that I was Lily's legal guardian and that her assertions were baseless. I also mentioned how uprooting Lily from her home and separating her from her father would be extremely difficult for her. Karen stormed out of my house, claiming that I would hear from her lawyer shortly. I was left feeling angry, hurt, and concerned about what would happen next. Since then, I've documented all of my interactions with Karen and kept meticulous records of Lily's care. I've also contacted a family lawyer to evaluate my choices and prepare for any possible legal battle. I'm convinced that keeping Lily with me is the right decision, but Karen's accusations and threats have unsettled me. I can't help but wonder if I'm selfish for not taking her suggestion more seriously. Emily has been battling with infertility owing to hormonal difficulties. She and John had been trying for a child for several years with no success. I sympathize with their position, but I don't think it justifies taking Lily from me. For Lily's sake, I tried to stick to our regular pattern during the next few days. I took her to the park, told her bedtime tales, and did my best to keep her away from the conflict with her grandmother. However, I couldn't stop feeling anxious, wondering when the other shoe might drop. A week after Karen's first visit, I received a formal letter from a lawyer representing her. The letter made a number of charges against me, including neglect and emotional abuse. I was accused of working too much and abandoning Lily with strangers, alluding to her nanny, who has been with us for over a year, who Lily adores. The letter also implied that I was emotionally unstable as a result of my sadness over Sarah's death and incapable of providing a supportive environment for Lily. Reading these claims felt like a punch in the stomach. Since Sarah's death, I have dedicated my entire life to ensuring Lily's happiness and well-being. My efforts were distorted and used against me, which was both infuriating and devastating. I immediately phoned my attorney and forwarded the letter to her. She informed me that the allegations were unfounded and that we had a good case to keep custody. She suggested I get character references from Lily's pediatrician, preschool instructors, and other family members who could attest to my parenting skills. As I started reaching out to people for recommendations, I was overwhelmed by the response. Lily's teachers applauded her development and social abilities, pointing out how well-adjusted she appeared despite the loss of her mother. Our pediatrician praised Lily's health and my parenting skills. Even Sarah's relatives and aunts expressed their support, stating that they disagreed with Karen's behavior. Despite the outpouring of sympathy, I couldn't shake the sense of betrayal. Karen has been a part of our lives since Lily's birth. She had helped us during Sarah's illness and after her death. I'd always assumed we had a decent connection, even if it was occasionally strained by our shared sadness. It felt like she was tearing away what was left of our family. I tried to grasp Karen's point of view. Perhaps she truly believed that Lily would be better off with Emily and John. Perhaps she was dealing with her own grief and wanted to keep a bit of Sarah close by raising Lily with her other daughter. But no matter how I looked at it, I couldn't rationalize her conduct or the harsh charges she leveled against me. Update 1. Emily and John arrived unannounced at my home yesterday. I was astonished to see them, especially after Emily's previous conversation, in which she apologized for her mother's actions. Lily was napping, so I welcomed them in for a peaceful conversation. Emily began the conversation by stating that they thought it would be best for Lily to live with them. John nodded, appearing uncomfortable but supportive of his wife. I listened patiently and tried to remain cool. When Emily had done, I gently but firmly voiced my position. I explained that while I appreciated their concern, Lily was my kid, and I had no intention of giving up custody. I highlighted Lily's happiness and well-being, and that uprooting her would be terrible. Emily's conduct abruptly changed. Her expression hardened as she accused me of being selfish. She claimed I was damaging Lily's life by denying her motherly care. I was shocked. Emily then accused me of preparing to marry another woman and make her Lily's stepmother, which startled me. This was totally bogus. I hadn't considered dating since Sarah's death, let alone remarry. Emily became even more upset after I denied this. In a bizarre moment, Emily accused me of never actually loving Sarah or Lily. She added that if I truly cared about Lily's well-being, I would let her grow up with a real family. Her remarks were so scathing that they stunned me into stillness. As I struggled to react, John attempted to calm Emily down, but she dismissed him. She jumped up abruptly and announced that they would be meeting with their lawyer again. Emily said they will fight for custody and that I should be ready to lose Lily. They swiftly left after that, leaving me reeling from the experience. I sat quietly for a long time, trying to understand what had just transpired. After I'd collected myself, I called my lawyer to inform her of this new situation. She urged me to chronicle the visit and Emily's threats, assuring me that they had no legal basis to take Lily away from me. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, I hugged her a little closer than normal. I told her and myself that I'd do everything in my power to protect our small family. The path ahead might be challenging, but I was ready to tackle whatever hurdles came our way. Now I'm left wondering how things got to this point. How did a once supportive family become so fractured? And most crucially, how can I protect Lily from the impending storm while also keeping her bonds with her extended family? Update 2. 2 days after Emily and John's visit, Elizabeth, Sarah's grandma, called me. She's always been the family's voice of reason, so hearing from her was reassuring. However, what she told me astonished and infuriated me. Elizabeth told me she overheard a chat between Karen and Emily. It found out that their sudden interest in obtaining custody of Lily was motivated by more than just relatives or providing a mother figure. There was a considerable financial incentive. Sarah inherited a large quantity of money from her late grandfather. Sarah and I had chosen to place all of the money in a trust fund for Lily's future. Lily could lawfully access the money once she reached 25. Elizabeth added that Karen and Emily assumed that if they got custody of Lily, they would also gain control of her inheritance. They regarded it as a means to alleviate Emily's financial problems and afford costly fertility procedures. I was infuriated. The concept of using Lily as a pawn in their attempt to obtain money that properly belonged to her was beyond comprehension. It explained their abrupt behavior shift and the lengths they were willing to take to obtain custody. I called my lawyer right away after hanging up the phone with Elizabeth. I explained the issue and sought counsel on how to protect Lily and her inheritance. My lawyer instructed me to follow these steps. 1. Document Elizabeth's statement. She suggested that I approach Elizabeth for a written statement about what she overheard. 2. Examine the trust documents. We needed to guarantee that the trust was irreversible and could not be accessed or altered if custody changed. 3. Notify the trustee. My lawyer advised notifying the trustee of the probable custody issue to avoid any unlawful alterations. 4. Consider a restraining order. Given the deteriorating circumstances, she suggested that I pursue a restraining order against Karen and Emily to safeguard Lily. 5. Prepare for court. While we hoped it would not come to this, my lawyer began drafting points to deliver in court if required, with a focus on Lily's best interests and the apparent financial objectives underlying the custody dispute. I spent the next few days acquiring all of the required papers and following my lawyer's instructions. The betrayal I felt was enormous. It was devastating to think that Sarah's own mother and sister would try to manipulate Lily for financial advantage. Despite my wrath, I attempted to remain cool for Lily's sake. She had picked up on the tension and had become more clingy than normal. I spent additional time with her, assuring her of my love and dedication. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, I found myself thinking about Sarah. I wanted her to be here to assist me get through this situation, but I knew she would be proud of how I was safeguarding our kid. I made a secret pledge to her and Lily that I would do everything I could to keep our little child safe and secure. Now, as I prepare for what might be a lengthy and unpleasant court struggle, I can't help but wonder how money was able to rip this family apart so utterly. And how can I safeguard Lily, not only now, but in the future, from those who may try to exploit her? Update 3. Karen sent me a note a week after I spoke with Elizabeth and my lawyer. She desired to meet and resolve matters civilly, without using the courts. I consented, hoping it would be an opportunity to end this nightmare. We met in a neutral setting, a quiet cafe in town. Karen and Emily were already present when I arrived. They both appeared anxious, but tried to be nice. Karen began by explaining that they had changed their strategy and wanted to find a solution that worked for everyone. Emily chipped in, proposing we schedule more frequent visits and even overnight stays for Lily at their home. I listened intently as they laid forth their plan. When they were finished, I took a long breath and decided it was time to put all of the cards on the table. I know about the inheritance, I responded gently. The effect was immediate. Karen's face turned pale and Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. They exchanged anxious looks, apparently not expecting this. I went on. I understand that this isn't about Lily's well-being or her desire for a mother figure. This is about Sarah's inheritance, which is already held in trust for Lily's future. Karen attempted to interrupt, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. Sarah and I established that trust together. This is for Lily's schooling and future. It is not available to anyone, including myself, until she is 25. Emily began to cry. Whether from remorse or frustration, I could not tell. Karen appeared to be about to disagree, but I pressed on. I have been patient. I've tried to understand, but exploiting my daughter as a pawn for money is unacceptable. So let me make it clear, this is the end. No more threats, no more accusations, and no more attempts to separate Lily from me. I stared them both in the eyes. If you continue like this, I will not hesitate to take legal action. I'll file for harassment, emotional anguish, and any additional charges that my lawyer recommends. I have documentation for everything, even your financial motivations. Karen's face stiffened. You can't prove anything, she asserted confidently. Are you willing to risk it? I asked. Because I am. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Lily. The hush that followed was crushing. Emily was the first to shatter it. We just wanted the best for Lily, she answered faintly. No, I responded firmly. You wanted the best for yourselves. Lily is happy, healthy and adored. That is what is best for her. I rose up, prepared to depart. This is your final warning. Stop now or we will take this to court. And believe me, the outcome will not be to your liking. As I walked away I heard Karen say, you can't keep us from seeing her. I turned around for the last time. I've never wanted that. You are still Lily's family, but it is up to you to prove that you deserve to be in her life. With that, I exited the cafe. As I drove home, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief that I had faced them, grief about how things had turned out and, most importantly, a newfound commitment to protect Lily and give her the life Sarah and I had envisioned for her. When I went home, I grabbed Lily closely, glad for her innocence throughout this. I hoped that one day, when she was older, she would realize that everything I did was out of love for her. Now I'm left wondering if I was too harsh. Should I have offered them another chance? Or was this the only way to keep Lily safe and honor Sarah's memory? Final update. It's been 6 months since my disagreement with Karen and Emily. The aftermath was difficult, but things eventually settled into a new normal. Karen and Emily backed off following our meeting. They formally apologized, admitting their mistakes and expressed regret for their acts. Although I appreciated this step, I remained wary. We've gradually restored some type of a relationship, mostly for Lily's benefit. They now have supervised visits once a month. It isn't ideal, but it's a beginning. Lily is prospering. She's happy, lively, and becoming more like Sarah every day. We talk about her mother frequently, keeping her memories alive. I created a support group for single parents who have lost their relationships. It has been healing to connect with those who understand my journey. I'm taking it one day at a time. The experience has made me more protective of Lily while also increasing my appreciation for our life together. I'm grateful for the encouragement I received and the courage I discovered to stand up for what's right. Lily's future is safe, and that is what really matters. My husband asked me to flash roadworkers. I did, and he became furious and pushed me out of the car. Was he being a jerk? Original post: been together 10 years, married for 6. The last 2 or 3 years he's started to show less and less interest in me. He does subscribe to a couple of OnlyFans accounts, which I'm not bothered about as it's no different to porn, so I know he still has sexual urges. I've tried talking to him a couple of times about this and told him I'm getting bored and frustrated, and he knows I'm willing to try anything sexual, so if there's anything he wants to do to get him motivated, I'll try it. He just says duly noted, and carries on with his day, which is frustrating. A few nights ago we had friends round for tea and we got onto the subject of commutes and roadworks, with them saying how their commute has more than doubled due to a road they use having roadworks. Carol, the wife of the couple, then says we've found a way to make it more entertaining though, haven't we? To her husband, and they both started laughing. She then tells us that the roadworks are about 3 miles long with the groups of workers spread out to maybe 7 or 8 groups, and they are normally going 10 to 15 miles per hour, so when they get near one of the groups he beeps and she flashes them and they all cheer. I couldn't believe it as they seem so straight-laced. That night when they left, my husband was saying how brave it is of them and that we should do it the next morning. I asked if he's sure. This is a man who didn't like when I posted a bikini pic on Facebook, and he said yes, and we even had sex that night for the first time in months, and he initiated for the first time in years. The next morning we were both at work, and as soon as he woke up he mentioned me flashing. I asked if he's sure and it wasn't just horny talk, and what if the men don't want to be flashed. He said he's sure and all men want to be flashed. We drive to the road and we see a group of workmen, and my husband gets all giddy and says, "Are you ready?" I say yes, and he says now. And beeps his horn, and I lift my top up and they all cheer. We are going about 10 miles per hour when suddenly he slams his brakes on and tells me to get out. I was in shock. His face is red with anger and he's shouting, "Get out, you fucking slag." I start crying and he's leaning over me, opening my car door, and then takes off my seatbelt and starts pushing me out. The cars behind are beeping as he's stopped traffic and he's yelling at the top of his voice. By now the workers have heard the commotion and 2 of them are rushing over to help. I turn to look at them, and I do. He pushes me really hard and the top half of my body falls out of the car, and I put my hands down. One of the workers is screaming at my husband and starts trying to open his door. The other worker is by me and quickly drags me out of the car. He told me afterwards he saw my husband put the car in gear and thought he was going to drive off with me hanging out the car. My husband just left me. I was still only wearing a vest top and pajama shorts and my slippers, as he'd wanted to rush out and do this. My phone was in his car and I didn't have any house keys. One of the workers took his jacket off and wrapped me up in it. They took me to a cabin that was their canteen and put the heater on and made me a cup of tea. I was so embarrassed. This lot had seen my boobs and then seen me getting abused and then fell out of a car and then rescued me all in the space of 30 seconds. I kept apologizing to them and said it was his idea, but they said it's okay and it happens a few times a day and they are used to it, but I think they were just trying to make me feel better. They were laughing and joking with me and were all so sweet and funny. They asked if I wanted to ring anyone, but I don't know anyone's number apart from work and I didn't want them picking me up wearing next to nothing from a building site. I asked if I could just ring a taxi, but they said I can't get in a taxi dressed how I am. The man I'm assuming was their team leader told one of them to drive me wherever I wanted to go, so I asked if I could go to my mom's house about 5 miles away. They gave me some spare work boots to walk across the mud to the van, and 2 of them drove me to my mom's, and they were really sweet and made sure I was okay and even walked me to the front door. When my mom answered, I was hysterical and crying, and they told her me and my husband had an argument and he left me by the side of the road. My mom offered them a drink and I tried to give them their coat and boots back, but they said it's okay. I told my mom we were driving to McDonald's and got into an argument. I didn't tell her about the pushing or anything. She drove me home and let me in with a spare key she has. I packed some things and went back to my mom's. My husband had been home as my phone was on the table. In the 5 days since, he's been ringing me non-stop saying he's sorry and he doesn't know what came over him. He said he heard someone shout, "Nice pair," and it made him angry. My friends are saying leave. He is obviously telling me to give him another chance. I'm 50-50, but if I do stay, I'm going to insist on couples counseling for us both and sex therapy either for him or both of us. He says he doesn't want to involve other people in the relationship. It feels silly to throw it all away over a few seconds of madness, and I should have just said no when he asked me to flash, as I know he's quite insecure. I was blinded by finally getting some sex and attention from him and thought I could get more. I took the workers their jackets and boots back and also made them 2 cakes and bought them 1,000 bags of Yorkshire tea as a thank you. TLDR, husband wanted me to flash. I did. He then physically pushed me out of the car but says he's sorry. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. I don't think any relationship advice will do anything to help your situation. Nor will couples counseling. This is definitely the sort of situation where couples counseling will only escalate problematic abusive behavior. What you need, quite frankly, is a divorce lawyer. OOP, that's the thought that's becoming more prevalent in my mind. I took pics of the bruises and scuffs on my arms and legs afterwards, and I kept looking at them and thinking, what would I say to anyone else who showed me them? Commenter 2. You sound codependent on him and do everything he tells you to do to please him, because you are terrified that he will leave you. Now you are in a situation where you did what he told you to do, but he ditched you anyway. He left you on the side of the road to the mercy of strangers that you just flashed with nothing on you. That was very dangerous, and it makes me question if he wanted something to happen to you. This relationship isn't safe for you anymore, and that probably will be for some time. He's abusive. He doesn't want to do couples counseling, because he knows what they would tell you. It isn't wise to do that with him anyway, because all that therapy is going to teach him are more weak points for you to take advantage of. Look for therapy for yourself. You know that he doesn't love you, that's why you accept all these behaviors of him. You can't make him love you by accepting his disrespect. You need to leave. It won't get better, it will get worse. Update. I took people's advice on this sub and a couple of others and rang the police to report the attack. I spoke to the workers beforehand who said they'd back me up. They arrested my husband and then released him on bail but told him he couldn't stay at my house, so he's gone to his mom's. After the argument, he told all our friends that I had cheated. I hadn't wanted to admit to people that I had flashed, but I felt like the tide was really turning against me and a lot of people were believing his lies, so I wrote a long message with a description of exactly what happened. Plus pictures of my injuries including scrapes and bruises, plus screenshots of messages he's sent admitting he asked me to flash, and admitting he hit me, although he did blame me, saying if I just got out like he asked he wouldn't have had to do that. A few people apologized, most didn't, but I don't care anymore. I'm back home and he has to answer bail in a couple of months. The police don't sound confident they can get a conviction, but maybe that's how they are supposed to sound. I've spoken a little bit to a lawyer, but I can't really afford anything at the minute in that way. Been a sad few weeks, but an eye-opener, and I don't feel any guilt for getting the police involved or telling people what happened. Just working and keeping myself busy at the moment. TLDR, I informed the police about the assault and he had to leave my house. Relevant comments. OOP on the workers who rescued her. OOP. Luckily the road worker was a big strong guy. He picked me up and got me out of the way like I was as light as a feather. That's the bit that plays on my mind the most. He drove off a split second after I was out of the car and the door was still open. I think in his mind I was still half in the car when he drove off. Can OP go to a safe place and away from her husband? OP, I don't think I need protection. My brother is staying with me now and he could beat up 10 of my husbands with one hand. Plus I feel like there's more deserving people than me who need a charity's help. OOP telling the police what happened and how they have responded. OP, I did tell the police exactly what happened, as did the workmen. Believe it or not, the police didn't care about me showing flesh and cared more about me getting beaten up and nearly ran over. Cousin falsely accused me of sexual assault, family cut me off. Now she's dying, admitted the truth, but they still want me to stay silent. Let's call her Jade. My cousin wrongfully accused me of sexual assault, when I was 18. Sadly, my family thought her narrative true. 4 years older than me, Jade and I were close growing up, but finally we drifted away. She is the daughter of my uncle, who was a single father, younger brother of mom. After his ex-wife became pregnant, my uncle married young. Unfortunately, she cheated on him, and their marriage broke up a few years later. She tried to keep in touch with Jade for a few years, but finally moved away with her new partner and they never got back in touch. Respectable man, my uncle always battled obstacles on his own and refused assistance. After his divorce, he never sought another major relationship. He devoted his life to parenting Jade. He even built a college fund for Jade, but after she turned 18 he told her that although he had done all in his ability to help her, she was now on her own financially as he had to consider his retirement. Although Jade disagreed, I thought that was reasonable. If she wanted to keep on her studies, she should pay for them herself. Many arguments between her and her father resulted from her believing he should support her studies for as long as she desired. Jade thus visited my family a lot of times. She would come over to rant to my mom following every disagreement with her father. Although I personally felt my uncle was reasonable, I kept my thoughts to myself as Jade would visit to speak with my mother and not me. As she usually did, Jade came up to our house one day without warning. I was the only one in the house. My parents were away. Expecting her to go, I'd told Jade that my mother decided to stay in the living room since she needed some time away from her father following another dispute. To be honest, I wasn't interested in hearing it again as she used to vent quite loudly to my mother and I had heard enough about her battles with her father. Jade began venting to me since my mother was not here. Though I had rather different ideas on the topic, I could see she expected me to be as empathetic as my mother. I cut her off when she once more started grumbling about her father. Although my mother might have agreed with her points of view, I felt my uncle was acting rather sensibly. He had spent his whole life raising her to be a competent and capable independent lady, I told her. Now it was her chance to show him right. If she truly wanted to pursue a master's degree or perhaps a doctorate, she would have to do what everyone else does and pay for it herself. She majored in STEM, hence I knew that whatever job she finally landed would be sufficient to cover her expenses. She had just to at least try. She insisted though, that she couldn't work and study at the same time and that she would find it too much to manage. I advised her maybe she should give up on further study if she already decided it was difficult for her to work while she was still in school. It was unjust to demand her father keep paying for everything, especially after he had already done so much for her, and she was treating him like the villain instead of being appreciative, I said. She quite obviously hadn't anticipated that reality check. She started screaming at me and calling me a vile human being as soon as I said all of this. She said I was a pampered brat who didn't deserve the support I received, hence I would never be able to relate what she was experiencing. Though I stayed quiet, to be honest I felt she was more of a pampered brat than I was. She screamed at me for a few minutes then fled the house sobbing. I avoided her since, as I mentioned, I had no interest in hearing her grievances over and over again. The sequence of events surprised me as well. My whole life collapsed the next day when she accused me of SA. One accusation turned everything around. After 3 years of quiet from my family, folks are at last learning she had lied. My parents woke me early the day after Jade and I argued, stating that my uncle and Jade were here to visit me, and it was reportedly rather vital. I had no idea what was going on, but when I got downstairs Jade started shouting, accusing me of SA the night before and acting as though she was breaking down. My parents were equally startled, and my uncle seemed really worried. Jade was acting as though she were not even in a state fit for communication. Most of the speaking came from my uncle. He said that following her confrontation with him, Jade had been inconsolable when she had returned home the day before. She eventually informed him I had lured her in and carried out the conduct she was now accusing me of when my parents were not home. Not even my uncle could look at me, and my parents avoided eye contact as well. None listened when I tried to object and assert my innocence. It was appalling. People already treated me like a criminal even though I had done nothing. My parents begged my uncle for pardon right in front of me, asking him not to publicly disclose the allegation or report me. They claimed they will do all necessary to resolve the matter. Whether I cried out or not, my uncle and dad totally turned away from me. It was so annoying that I grabbed a vase and tossed it against the wall in an attempt to get their eye. That backfired regrettably. My dad lost his cool, grabbed my arm, and hauled me to my room, closing me within. There was no way I could let Jade get away with this, hence I kept hammering against the door until my hands and arms started hurting. Telling such a big lie may have destroyed my reputation. Sadly, my dad allowed me out of the room only when my uncle and Jade left. I started crying right away as he opened the door and tried to explain to them he hadn't done anything, but they informed me they had seen security footage from the cameras outside our house. Jade had come over the previous evening, they noted, and had left the house crying a few minutes later. They decided to trust her based on her tear-filled fleeing. They told me they were embarrassed of the kind of son Jade had produced and that she had no reason to lie about what had transpired. While my mother was crying and unable to even talk, my dad assured me that, with great persuasion, they had persuaded my uncle and Jade not to file lawsuits. They were obliged to pledge something in return though. To spare her from seeing me and revisiting the horrific event, Jade and my uncle insisted that I be taken far away. After much debate, my dad decided to send me to live with my great uncle somewhere far from the family. With his bad attitude and anger problems, this great uncle was the least liked family member. Though he said it was the only fix, my dad knew I hated him. Not only was I being sent away, but they also told Jade that to keep things quiet, they were going to take my college fund and give it to her. I tried to complain, but there was no communication with them. Finally, I gave up as I no longer saw the need. Not even my own folks trusted me. Since her own father would never accept financial help from anyone, including his own family, I understood that Jade had most likely accused me unjustly only to control my parents and extract money out of them. After that episode, a few days later I was ready to go and packed. Neither my parents bothered to say goodbye or give me a hug. They kept me under house arrest by posing as I wasn't even at home for the following few days. My phone was taken away and I was not let said farewell to any of my friends. They cautioned me that they would destroy my life personally should I fail to get off the grid and vanish from everyone's lives. A falsehood Jade had uttered drove me to distance from everything I knew and cut relationships with everyone from my past. My great uncle showed in a few days following that to pick me up, and I was sent off to live with him in what felt like an exile. Not one person from my past has contacted me since then, not even my friends or family. I had to totally start again in my life. It was quite challenging to fit in with my great uncle when I initially moved in. Throughout the day he taunted me nonstop even though he had no idea why I had been sent out. Though he had no idea why I had been sent out, he would harass me nonstop during the day. He would hold it against me and tease me about it based just on my being kicked out. I had to walk on eggshells around him as he had a bad attitude and rage problems as I've noted. Though I knew my parents were paying him money every month, he still acted as though he was doing me a great favor by allowing me to stay with him. After the first few weeks, I understood there was no use to weep over lost milk. I knew I couldn't live with him indefinitely. My parents had cut me off and forbade me from interacting with anybody from my former life. I resolved to start looking for work as all I could do was maximize the circumstances. Not even could I go to college. I had been let into the college of my choice, but I lacked the resources to pay for attendance. Following several weeks of moping about and a few interviews, I at last landed a job as a warehouse worker. Although the work paid little and was physically demanding, at least with my first pay I could leave the house owned by my great uncle. I had the good fortune to have a few colleagues around my age who were likewise having financial difficulties. The three of us decided to chip in and share an apartment and grew close friends. I knew my great uncle would consider it a good riddance, so I didn't even bother telling him when I moved out of his house. Never heard from any of my family members once I moved out. I have been living with the same folks I found my first apartment with for the past 3 years. Every one of us has been quite fortunate. After a few months of working in the warehouse, all three of us resolved to keep searching for better prospects as the work was quite physically demanding. We all aspire to eventually go to college, hence throughout the past 3 years we have switched jobs and worked to save some money. I'm making a good salary currently working in sales. I have been considering applying once more to universities. My two buddies are doing great as well. We recently moved into a larger apartment in a far better area. Naturally, my family believes it's the ideal time to attempt and come back into my life now that things are beginning to show promise for me. I was pretty taken aback when my dad contacted me by email a few days ago since, as I indicated, I hadn't spoken with them in 3 years. Since it was one of the rules my parents made when they kicked me out and I had been anxious about them disseminating the truth and tarnishing my name, I am not active on social media. I so stayed to the guidelines. Though they never tried to get in touch with me, my email address has not changed in 3 years and I never banned them anywhere. Reading the email, it was essentially an apology for all that had transpired over the preceding 3 years. To enable his correct outreach to me, my dad required my address and contact details. In case I wished to get in touch on my own time, he also included his personal contact details. Jade had at last chosen to disclose the truth about what actually transpired, thus his apology and the abrupt attempt at reconciliation sprang from it. She was dying and, I suppose, had at last acquired a conscience or something. She informed her father the truth for whatever reason, and he talked with my parents. My parents chose to get back in touch with me once they knew the truth. Regarding Jade, her pancreatic cancer diagnosis makes it quite improbable she will survive. She has been suffering for the past 8 months. Her health is just getting worse even with continuous medication. Ironically, she couldn't even make decent use of the money from my education fund. She squatted all the money on bad life decisions after screwing me off. She chose to take a gap year with all that money and tour the globe to expand her horizons and find herself instead of working toward her master's degree. Wanting to live luxuriously, she had already spent more than half of her savings when she returned roughly 1.5 years earlier. She came back with very little left and began pestering my parents for more. If she stole any more money from my parents though, my uncle threatened to cut her off. She thus gave up on the concept of schooling since she lacked enough money left to afford a master's degree without working, and since working was something she refused to do. She still had some money left, but she kept her careless way of life instead of using it sensibly or trying to increase capital. She was already somewhat spoiled and lethargic from her year-long holiday. Despite not even seeking a job, she ultimately wasted more money purchasing an apartment and living above her means. She landed a job around a year ago, but she had to quit shortly after learning she had cancer. She now needs the money, hence she has to sell her flat and all else she purchased. Although I don't want to come across as callous, after learning what had happened to her I couldn't help but feel some gratification. She was her own worst enemy, so she had no enemies. After I closed the email from my dad, I had to consider whether or not I wanted to contact my parents again. I decided to talk to my friends about it, which also meant I at last had to tell them the truth about why my parents had kicked me out. I had simply informed them that we argued. Up until then, I had not disclosed the actual cause. Email later, I at last opened it to my buddies. I told them everything about Jade, how she had lied and thrown me under the bus, and how my parents had thought her over me. They not only drove me to live with the worst relatives conceivable, but also had me cut everyone from my past off and threatened to destroy my reputation should I go against them. The truth I was imparting to my companions hardly seemed possible. They urged me not to contact my parents after I was done. They claimed they wouldn't pardon my parents either, if they were in my place. Since these are my closest friends and at this time they're essentially the only ones I have, I pay great attention to their advice. It's not only that they advised me to let go and avoid running across my parents again. They also advised me to talk about what happened to me. Though I did nothing illegal, I have been living in anxiety for the past 3 years. They are right, my parents choose to believe someone lied about me, hence I had to give up so much of my life. I have to talk if I want to take back my life. I told my parents I intended to reveal the actual account of events before I went public. People have a right to know the truth. So it makes no difference whether Jade is lying on deathbed. She destroyed my life. Today it is my chance to recover it. I thus texted the number my dad had supplied me and informed him exactly what I was going to do. The screenshots of the email my dad sent me already proved Jade had been lying. I could thus post the truth on social media immediately. Forget about just blogging, I may at last have social media once more. Though I suppose he misinterpreted the circumstances, I wasn't asking my dad for approval. Now he and my mother, together with my uncle, are blowing my phone and asking me not to do this. They contend that Jade has already gone through a lot, is suffering more than she has ever done, and has gotten her karma. They say I need not discipline her going forward. They are requesting me not to reveal the facts in public since it will damage Jade's reputation. Without saying why I left in the first place, they seem to believe I can come back into their life and resume what I left behind. In a sense, they are correct, no one will probably challenge it. Though I could, I do not think I want to. Jade stole a great portion of my life and even my friends find it quite reasonable for me to share the truth. It is about people knowing what actually happened, not about exacting revenge against her. Besides, there are few logical reasons for missing 3 years from everyone's life and then showing up again without a word. I'm happy enough here, so I don't even intend to return to the city. Yet I do miss some of my relatives and friends who treated me well. They should, at least, be entitled to know the truth. The only thing keeping me from posting is the constant calls and texts from my parents and uncle. They almost have been begging me not to go public. Jade seems to be in quite poor form. What then would happen if I went ahead and revealed to my cousin, even if she is on deathbed, the truth of why I had to leave everything behind for 3 years? Update 1. I finished it, lads. I considered it for a long time, repeatedly asked friends, and they all advised the same thing. Though I hadn't done anything, Jade and her family had taken away 3 years of my life that I could have spent properly, and I had to live in fear because of them. Whether or not Jade is in condition, it would be quite legitimate for me to exact retribution. Many of the responses on this reflected the same viewpoint. Ultimately, it was my choice at the finish. Knowing most people would support me helped me to feel much better. My first post was a week ago, and last night I finally posted a narrative of everything that has transpired in my life together with an explanation for my 3-year absence from the net. Friends, relatives, everyone who knew me, have contracted out to let me know they are here for me and have sorely missed me. I trust them as I had several communications from folks over the first few months after I vanished. Apparently, my parents advised everyone not to search for me after that, saying I wanted to be left alone since I had gone through something horrific and needed time and space to recover. People thus stopped trying to get in after the first few months, believing they were honoring my choices. My friends informed me they had repeatedly asked my parents where I was, but my parents never told them, so they couldn't get in touch with me. Even many of my family claimed to have waited patiently for me to come back. Seeing how ready everyone was to welcome me back and how none had forgotten me made me somewhat cry. Most importantly, people have claimed that they always regarded Jade to be shady. Nonetheless, what she did was low, even by her standards. My mom and uncle haven't said anything thus far. I hope they stay out of it, as I truly don't want to talk to them. Regarding myself, having all of this off my mind makes me feel a lot more free. Speaking up about what happened was wise. I have no regrets about anything. Update 2. I posted it some few days ago, and yesterday my folks got in touch with me. Having only asked one thing, that I let sleeping dogs lie, they informed me they were quite let down in me. They wanted me to come up with a reason for my 3-year absence, but not tell everyone the truth about what happened, since they think Jade deserves peace and quiet in her present state. After my post, apparently, Jade has lost almost all of her friends, and even family members are no longer eager to talk to her. They seem to be blaming me. It's startling that they still provide more concern for what Jade is going through than for their own son's experiences. I told them I no longer bothered about their displeasure. An apology will never be sufficient. They let me down on several levels, and today they have no right to demand anything from me. I could say the same thing about myself if they believe Jade should have peace and quiet only because she is cancer-ridden. I was just 18 when they booted me out and forced me to live with my nasty great uncle. They showed no pity or forgiveness for me. I at least am speaking the truth. Jade lies, and she got away for 3 years. I'm going to take back my life now, and I'm not going to let anyone attempt and cause me shame about it. I advise them not to get in touch with me ever again, and that their only cause of disappointment should be themselves. Then I finally blocked them. Something I should have done long ago, but I was confused and afraid. Speaking up about what has occurred to me, though, has helped me to find closure, and today I am not under pressure to deal with my parents. For all I care, they and their expectations can go for a hike. Update 3. Hey, after 3 hard years this weekend, I finally chose to see my friends and relatives. It turned out to be rather the finest choice I have ever taken. Along with me, more for moral support than anything else, were my housemates. To be honest, they have gotten so close that we are now like brothers, and I wanted them to see my buddies too. Everyone has been getting along fantastic. My buddies were happy to see me. Since they all were outraged when I mentioned I was planning to stay in a hotel, I am actually living with one of them right now. Though I'm returning in a few days, my heart is simply so happy that I cannot even put it into words. We are spending our time of life living together in one of my friends' residences among my roommates and old buddies. I have also visited quite a few of my relatives, who have informed me they have cut off my mom, uncle and Jade. They never intend to be involved with them ever once more. At the end of the day, people will always stand for what is right, which makes me rather glad. Having individuals around who love me more than my parents ever did makes me happy, as they did not forget me. My friends didn't invite me to their wedding, then made me the bad guy when I couldn't attend at the last minute. Original post. Sorry for the long story, I added a TL.dr. I'm definitely looking for advice, but it comes with a backstory. A friend, Greg 28, in my circle of friends met Shannon 28, about 5 years ago, and they immediately hit it off. Everybody instantly fell in love with Shannon because she's friendly and really fun to hang out with. They were everybody's favorite couple and really made our hangouts much more fun. We all knew they were perfect for each other. They both made our crew that much better. The engagement was expected, but much welcome news. Our friend's circle was buzzing about the inevitable wedding. Then the invitations went out. You know those save the date magnets that people send out? Well, it really sucked seeing them on everybody else's fridge when I visited friends, knowing I didn't get one and wasn't invited. Feeling left out really sucks. But it gets worse. I completely understand how stressful wedding planning is, and I believe nobody should feel that they have to invite people they don't want to their wedding. It's their day and their ceremony, and they shouldn't have to have people there who they don't want there. I didn't cause a fuss or express to anyone that I was hurt, that I felt excluded from the wedding and by extension, excluded from the group. I didn't want to be looked on in an even worse way that I feel I was apparently being looked at. But one friend actually stood up for me. When their wedding came up in conversation and people talked about booking flights and rooms, destination wedding in New York City. Eventually I was asked if I had booked yet. I said, me and my girlfriend, weren't invited. Nobody could believe it, but I insisted that I wasn't upset because I know how situations like this can go. I didn't want to cause trouble because then the happy couple might resent me. Then I'd be the bad guy. I heard through other friends that my friend Tracy thought it was really messed up that I wasn't invited. She and I never spoke of how I wasn't invited to the wedding, but she really felt a certain way about it. So a month before the destination wedding, I got a text from Greg basically saying sorry for forgetting to send an invite, but that they would love to have us come to the wedding. It was way too late at that point for me. I couldn't get away from my job, and I didn't have a chance to put money aside for a year for an expensive NYC destination wedding like everyone else did. I didn't even get a save the date. Every flight and hotel, no rooms where everyone else was staying, obviously. Too late for that, was unaffordable for me. I texted him back that I couldn't make it. The wedding came and went and I felt bad about everything. I saw the Facebook pictures of my friends all having the time of their lives. It looked like a great wedding. There's even a picture of just the group of friends labeled the crew. I don't think I've ever felt so left out, honestly. It really made me feel worthless and unwanted. So naturally the typical thoughts surfaced. They don't like you. They think you're annoying. They think you're an asshole. If you can't identify the schmuck in a group of friends, that means you're it. They think you try way too hard to be nice and think you're a phony. Then, as if it couldn't get any worse, Shannon messaged me on Facebook asking why I didn't RSVP and said they missed me at the wedding. RSVP. RSVP. Doesn't one have to be invited in order to RSVP? Everybody got a year to prepare between getting save the dates and actual wedding invitations. I got a text message a month before the wedding. Just as I feared, I'm being made out to be the bad guy, and I even made a point to keep my feelings to myself and play it cool. But as usual, I didn't say this to her because I know how I would end up looking. I actually apologized for, I don't even know. But I made a point to mention how I spoke with Greg about it. I also made sure to compliment the wedding pictures and say it looked like fun. I did everything I could in that conversation to make it easier on her, and of course now I feel like a total schmuck. That was this past summer and I haven't seen them since. I feel like that's it for me in the group now. I see some of the friends in our group every now and then, but everything feels different now. None of them even responded to my birthday party Facebook invite this month. I feel like things are being said behind the scenes and I feel completely out of the loop. It felt like a passive-aggressive message that maybe Greg and Shannon never actually liked me. My fiancé gets along great with Shannon and she's just confused. Seeing her confusion just makes my heart break even more because she's a sweetheart who's never offended anybody in her life. I wish I could break it to her that I'm just the guy in the group that Greg and Shannon think sucks, but I don't know how, and I feel like a complete loser who deserves this. I'll always appreciate Tracy for sticking up for me. She may never know how awesome it feels hearing about how she told everybody it was messed up that I was left out. I haven't even spoken to her about how the whole thing made me feel, or anybody for that matter. Reddit, you are the first to hear about it, because I didn't want it to appear like I'm making a stink and become even more disliked. This whole thing just fucking sucks. I feel like I don't have friends anymore. And to make it worse, soon I'll have a wedding of my own and I'm afraid I won't have any friends there, except for Tracy, of course. How am I supposed to handle who I invite so it doesn't seem like I'm leaving people out for petty revenge? How the hell do I navigate a toxic situation that I had no hand in creating? I still feel like I'm in the dark or could be overreacting. What the hell? TL.er, friends forgot or chose not to invite me to their wedding. After a friend stuck up for me, I was invited via text message, with little notice, had to decline, then asked why I didn't RSVP and that I was missed. Soon I'll have my own wedding to plan and don't feel like I have any friends to invite, don't know if I should invite certain people, don't know how to even approach the situation I didn't create. Relevant comments, deleted. Dude, you clearly tell them you are not respected like the others. Cut them out, this is about self-respect. Find new friends, don't turn back. OOP, thanks for reading and responding. Yeah, I've been thinking, I guess I can have my younger brother be the best man and just not have groomsmen, considering the circumstances. It's just fucked how I did everything I could to avoid looking like the bad guy, yet here we are. I'm the bad guy regardless of anything I did. Doc. Just that totally sucks. I would be hurt too. Do you think maybe Greg was in charge of sending invites to his friends and forgot? Or it got lost in the mail? I had an invite returned to me 1 month after I sent it, but thankfully I'd sent a save the date and sent my invite super early, so it ended up being fine, but if I hadn't, one of my cousins might have incorrectly thought she was excluded. It sounds like Shannon, at least, thought you were sent an invite if she was upset you didn't RSVP. You actually did RSVP by texting Greg back, but it sounds like she thought you'd been sent an RSVP response card. OOP. Yeah, it could just be a simple misunderstanding, but word seemed to get around early that I didn't get a save the date and even later didn't get an invite either. Tracy especially seemed to make sure everybody was aware that she wasn't happy about my exclusion. The other friends I spoke to didn't even suggest that it could have been a mistake, almost like they knew something I didn't but didn't feel comfortable saying it. Only one person even spoke up on my behalf. Update. I half took everyone's advice and brought it up with Tracy. She just confirmed that Shannon was full of shit when she asked me why she didn't get my RSVP and wanted to absolve herself of guilt. I'm not sure if they forgot or if I just wasn't invited yet, but Tracy said we'd talk about it more tonight when she gets out of work. Final update. I spoke about it in depth with Tracy. It turns out Greg's best man, someone who was never in the gang but grew up with Greg, always hated me and Greg thinks I'm annoying. Shannon later felt bad they chose not to invite me and pressured him to invite me over text knowing I wouldn't be able to make it. Also, it wasn't only Tracy who thought it was wrong that I didn't get an invite, and the chatter is what made Shannon ask me why I didn't RSVP, to make it seem like my invite was lost in the mail. It feels better knowing this because, like I said, they don't have to have people they don't want at their wedding. But knowing Greg doesn't like me fucking hurts because I always thought we were friends. Turns out he's the phony. Unfortunately, everybody else, except for Tracy and a few others, liked Greg more than me, so they kinda felt like they had to choose a side after Tracy, and a few others, it turns out, brought up why I didn't get invited. Lots of people are feeling guilty about this, apparently. They still felt like they had to choose a side for whatever reason. Probably because most of them went to high school with Greg. Oh well, that's life. Thanks for the advice about being more assertive. Those of you who were polite about it were very helpful. Thanks. Relevant comments, deleted. Yeah, you don't need those two-faced assholes in your life. Congratulations on finding out before they borrowed money from you. When they get divorced, you can reach out to Greg and tell him that he deserves it. OP, it's funny you bring up borrowing money because they're the type who always want to split the check when they order the most expensive shit and always say, "I'll get you back." And I don't trust Venmo. I'll just give you cash when I go to the ATM, and don't. On the plus side, I don't have to pay for part of their steak and lobster dinners anymore. Will OOP invite Greg, Shannon and the best man to his wedding? I don't think it would be right to force anybody to choose sides, because that feels inappropriate to do to friends. I think everybody who stood up for me gets an invite. Greg can have his best man and be the cynical bastards they are together. Honestly, nobody really likes the best man all that much because he's always acted like an obnoxious asshole when he's been around us. They can have each other when told to talk to Greg directly and get it from the source, actually got confirmation, and an apology, from someone else. Not everybody was cool with it, but she's the only one who really has a spine and spoke up for me. Turns out they fucked up and caused all kinds of drama between people in the group. Some people wanted to keep me out of the loop so I wouldn't feel insulted. I kinda get it, but it just makes me appreciate Tracy more. Final comments from OOP Ryra Jin. In this situation you aren't the bad guy from my perspective, and to be honest, a destination wedding is a dick move on your friend's part. The sheer inconvenience of one is like dick move supreme, especially the fact they chose NYC, WTF. Plus some people turn into assholes after marriage, and statistically speaking, your married male friend is going to be spending more time with his wife now than his friends. In some ways marriage is like high school. You go to it with your friends for a little while, then you start to drift away from another by barely communicating. OOP Shannon is from up there and she wanted to be closer to her family. Yeah, it turns out they didn't want me there and felt pressured once some of my friends realized. I guess it was easier to make the decision when it was just the two of them and they lost confidence in the choice when people found out. Ryra Jin, I feel it's best to let the consequences of this affect them, and just move on. OOP. Yeah. Hopefully they learn from this and aren't such assholes in the future. I don't see Greg ever changing from the cynical and negative guy he is, but you never know. Am I the asshole for refusing to move my wedding to accommodate my brother's travel schedule? Now, everyone is furious with me. Living alone, I'm a 28-year-old lady with a regular 9-to-5 job. After almost 4 years together, Erin, my fiancé, and I have been engaged for around 1 year. We are at last organizing our wedding, something I have been dreaming about. I have given every tiny detail great care. For the past 4 months I have been tirelessly trying to make sure everything is flawless. We expected all of our loved ones to be there, so we selected the date, issued invites. That was the intended course of action regardless. Brandon and Daisy, my parents, make for an intriguing team. My 58-year-old dad works for a building company. He has always been the quiet, follow-through kind. Daisy, my mother, 55, has stayed at home for as long as I can recall. They have always harbored a particular fondness for my 32-year-old older brother, Fred. Actually, soft spot could be understated. Certainly their favorite, he is the golden child if you will. Fred is somewhat a bit of a character. Though I'll say he's usually ambitious, none of his commercial endeavors ever really turn out. He seems to live in a fantasy world where his next great invention would at last make him wealthy, having had several failed businesses. Married to Alice, 30, he has 2 children, 3-year Jenna and 5-year Ethan. Although I personally have nothing against them, it is no secret they live much over their means. My parents are always rescuing them. It has come to the point where it is expected. While I have always had to fend for myself, Fred and his family effectively live off the support of my parents. Though I knew there would be some drama, especially with Fred's concerns, I couldn't wait to inform my family when Aaron proposed. Still, I tried to be upbeat. I recall the day we announced our participation. Just close family and friends, we had a little gathering at our residence. Sharing the news made me very eager, and for a split second it felt as though perhaps my parents would be delighted for me rather than only focused on Fred. Naturally though, Fred and Alice took the front stage. Just midway through our announcement, Fred began discussing his plans to open a new company and his desire to move to a larger house. The entire dialogue turned from our involvement to Fred's most recent ideas. Though it was aggravating, to put it mildly, I did not want to create a scene. I simply let my pride slide after swallowing it. Aaron observed though, and later that evening he told me he was glad of my handling of it. That was quite meaningful to me. Choosing the day was still another challenge. 4 months ahead we chose a date so that everyone had plenty of time to arrange. Before deciding on it, I even followed up with my parents to see whether they were conflict-free. No trouble, they promised me they would be there. Although I should have known better, I thought that marked the end of it. I went all out in the particulars. We selected flowers, a lovely location, and the ideal outfit. Everything was lining up and I was growing increasingly enthusiastic. This was meant to be our day, a celebration of our love amid the people most important to us. Hoping it would assist to ease any possible problems, I also included Fred and Alice in the wedding party. Deeply though, I felt a storm was building. That storm struck when my parents abruptly contacted me from out of the blue with a pressing demand. It sounded bad since they had to discuss the wedding. My parents abruptly decided a few weeks ago to travel with Fred and his family. At first I puzzled myself since I assumed they were discussing a trip following the wedding. But actually, they meant the week my wedding was scheduled. Since the wedding date ran counter to their vacation schedule, they wanted to know whether I might potentially change it. I gasped. I booked everything, the venue, the caterers, and had months of planning for this wedding. I sent invites. And now, as if it were some laid-back dinner gathering, they were asking me to reschedule the date. Suddenly less significant than a last-minute trip with Fred and his family was my wedding day, the day meant to be about Aaron and me. Though I attempted to keep cool, I was enraged. Why would they want to schedule a trip right next to the wedding date we have already decided upon? The answer from my mother was, well, you know how occupied Fred's calendar is, and this was the only time they could all go together. It shocked me. Fred's trip came first for them than my wedding. I informed them there was no choice about the date. Everything was previously set, I could not have moved it merely to fit Fred's trip. Suggesting that perhaps I should at least speak with the venue and see if they could change the date, my dad tried to be a peacemaker. But I closed that right away. The date was decided upon and that was definitive. My mother became irate and declared I was being irrational when I insisted on a different date. She continued on how family should come first, and how my rigidity was making things tough for everyone. She even charged me with trying to sour their friendship with Fred and his family. Though I stood my ground, that truly stung. I informed them I was not going to reschedule the date. If they missed it, that was on them. For a minute they were quiet. Then my mother remarked they would have to think about it. They hung up, not even bidding farewell. It still amazed me that my own parents, on vacation, were genuinely thinking about skipping my wedding. Furious on my behalf, Aaron advised me to try to straighten things out by calling them back. I therefore followed. Hoping for some middle ground, I phoned them, but things did not proceed as expected. I tried to convey the significance of this wedding to me, the length of time I had been arranging it, and how painful it was that they were even recommending I change the date. Still, they were tenacious. My dad kept stating that Fred's family had already booked everything, fully ignoring the fact that I had booked everything in advance too. My mom kept suggesting that I was being irrational. Changing my schedule would be equally as difficult for me. It felt like chatting to a stone wall. I realized at the time I had to include the extended relatives. I told my aunt, who I live somewhat near, the circumstances. She promised to talk to my parents. She was exactly as startled as I was. Maybe hearing it from someone else will help them to recognize how foolish they were acting. My parents doubled down instead of backing off though. Beginning to present me as the irrational one, they began phoning other family members. They claimed I was not compromising and causing problems for everyone. They even made hints suggesting I was envious of Fred and sought to punish him by postponing the wedding date. Though some of the family began to support me, stating I should be more accommodating of Fred's family, it was total stupidity. They were obviously attempting to get me to cave in. I was not going to let them prevail. They were trying to compel me to modify the date by means of shame and family pressure. I was about to let them wreck it just to please Fred. I had every right to have my wedding on the day I had selected. I thus informed them that the date was set. Should they be unable to make it, that would be their choice. But that was final. I was not going to alter it. So Reddit, am I the jerk for not adjusting the wedding date in response to the vacation of their golden child? I am very appreciative of everyone who took the time to reply. After publishing my experience here, I got an incredible amount of support and guidance. Reviewing the comments, many individuals speculated that there could be more to my parents' abrupt trip plans than they were disclosing. It started me to consider, thus I chose to dig some. I began by chatting once more with my aunt, who has always seemed to me as essentially a second mother. She was not surprised by what was happening as she knew how my parents are with Fred. She became quite quiet though, when I mentioned the vacation. A moment later she said she had heard Fred was once more experiencing some major financial difficulties. His most recent commercial endeavor apparently failed, and he owed money. Though not enough, my folks had started supporting him once more. Desperate, Fred was seeking for a means to keep his head above water. As it happens, the trip was really a cover tale. Though not for a laid-back vacation, my parents were intending to send Fred and his family to Europe. They were scheduled to meet some possible backers Fred had located abroad. Before Fred lost everything, the entire trip was a last-ditch attempt to find someone to commit to his company. Their financial position was depending on this trip to save Fred, hence they were quite determined to travel. When I learned, I became enraged. It was about my parents once more putting Fred above everything else, including my wedding, not only about the vacation. They were ready to skip my big day in order to try to save Fred from another problem he had created. Knowing the facts, I understood I had to face Fred. I inquired whether we might meet when I phoned him. I didn't want to allow him time to get ready for any excuse, thus I didn't inform him what it was about. I came right to the point when we got together. I assured him I understood his financial problems, the trip, the investors. He initially tried to play it off, claiming it was merely a business opportunity that happened to line up the wedding date, but I was not buying it. Defensively, he stated I didn't know how much pressure he was under. How he was trying everything he could to support his family. I reminded him that our parents had been rescuing him for years. This was not the first time he had fallen into a financial hole. Fred said at last that things were terrible. His company was close to bankruptcy, hence he would lose everything should this investor transaction fall short. But he sought to guilt-trip me rather than own responsibility. As his sister, he advised me to want to assist him in whatever capacity, even if that meant changing the date of my wedding. He charged me with being egotistical and unconcerned about his family. That was the final straw. I informed him that although I had supported him as much as I could over the years, I would not be sacrificing my wedding day for his bad choices. I made it plain that I was not going to modify the date. If he couldn't be there, that was his option. I went away leaving him seated there. Following the confrontation with Fred, I chose to get in touch with Alice. I wanted to hear her side of the tale since I wasn't sure how much she knew about things. She seemed tense as soon as we sat down when we met for coffee. She most likely understood I was not there to discuss wedding preparations. I asked her straightforwardly about her knowledge of Fred's predicament and the European trip. She said she knew the financial problems but lacked all the specifics. Though Fred had withheld a lot of it from her to guard her, she knew things were horrible. She appeared startled when I told her the true motivation for the vacation. She was unaware that my parents intended to try to find investors for Fred's company during the trip. Alice said she had been concerned about Fred's spending patterns for some time, but every time she brought it up he would dismiss her. She also said she was disappointed about missing the wedding, but Fred had persuaded her this trip was absolutely essential for their futures. When I told her how much this was affecting me and how it was seriously dividing the family, she seemed really offended. Alice clearly seemed to be in a difficult position. She wanted to help her husband, but she also wanted to avoid being the cause my parents missed my wedding. I wasn't holding my breath when she promised to speak with Fred and try to find another way to handle things. If only Fred is stubborn. Knowing that Alice wasn't totally on board with this strategy made me feel a bit better, but I also realized that ultimately Fred was probably going to act any way he felt was best for him, regardless of how it affected the rest of us. Given everything that had transpired, I came to see that gathering the entire family and laying everything out on the table was the only way to fix this. Though I wasn't sure how it would turn out, I knew that it would only become worse if we avoided confronting this squarely. I thus convened a family conference. We needed to talk, I told Fred, Alice and my parents. No apologies, no delays. We chose to get together at my folks' house. Having Aaron at my side made me happy as he came to support me. You could see my folks were concerned since they were already here. Arriving soon afterward, Fred and Alice seemed defensive from the first. We all gathered in the living room, and I lost no time. I began by informing them I knew Fred's financial problems and the true purpose of the Europe vacation. Fred tried to seem as if it wasn't a big problem as my parents looked startled. I had none at all. I laid everything out without holdback. The years of favoritism, the never-ending bailouts, and how this was only the most recent illustration of Fred coming first over me. I told them I knew they wanted to assist Fred, but there had to be a line and this was it. I described how much this wedding meant to me. How much work I had put into organizing it and how heartbroken I was that they would be ready to toss it all for travel. I then took out the proof I had collected, copies of emails and messages between Fred and my parents debating the trip, the investors, and how they should keep it under wraps. I even kept a copy of the itinerary proving that the vacation fell during my wedding week. Fred was enraged that I had gone behind his back to obtain this information. My parents seemed to want to crawl under the couch. I gave no thought at all. I was not going to allow them to keep controlling me or guilt-inducing me about wanting to have my wedding as scheduled. Alice wasn't totally on board with the vacation, which also seemed to surprise Fred. He turned to her, but she only turned away to validate what I had said. Starting to yell, Fred accused me of attempting to ruin his life and said I was merely jealous since he was the successful one in the family. Saying she only wanted to help both of her children and didn't want to have to pick between us, my mom started crying. Silence from my dad really infuriated me. Usually the one to keep out of the drama, he would have been here to support me this time. At last Alice spoke up, saying she felt uneasy about missing the wedding given her knowledge of the whole truth. She claimed they had to come up with another approach to handle Fred's company issues outside of compromising family occasions. Fred seemed inclined toward conflict, but Alice held her ground. In that instant I did indeed start to respect her somewhat. But I still had to finish. They had to decide whether to give this trip first priority and miss my wedding or find another method to assist Fred that did not necessitate deserting me. I made it plain that I would not be changing the date. If they could not accept this, they were clearly choosing what they wanted. I let them decide over 24 hours. I warned them I would terminate relations with them should they decide not to show up for the wedding. I was not going to let them ruin my wedding day or allow them to treat me as though I did not matter. I even intimated that, should they compel me, I will publicly share the complete truth. I knew that his final requirement was for his possible investors to learn about his financial mess. This was my trump card. Fred was furious as my parents seemed as though they had been struck by a truck. Alice merely looked depressed. Though I was tired of being pushed about and of constantly putting Fred's wants second, I didn't want to do this. Telling them they knew how to get to me, I got up, walked out with Aaron. Things have been tough since that conference. Neither my parents nor Fred have heard from each other, hence I'm not sure what they will decide. I am thus simply waiting to find out whether my parents will at last prioritize me or whether this marks the end of our relationship as I know it. Update. My parents contacted out at last after what felt like an eternity. It was the longest 24 hours of my life, and as I waited for their judgment I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I knew nothing about what they would say when my phone rang, and part of me wanted not to hear it. My mother began her apology first. They had thought a lot, she stated following our last talk. They asked me to change the date and came to see how much this wedding meant to me and how cruel they had been. She said she hadn't thought about how much they were hurting me in the process and they had been overly preoccupied trying to save Fred from his most recent catastrophe. We chose to gather at my parents' house. Having Aaron at my side made me happy as he came to support me. You could see my folks were concerned since they were already here. Arriving soon afterward, Fred and Alice seemed defensive from the first. We all gathered in the living room and I lost no time. I began by informing them I knew Fred's financial problems and the true purpose of the Europe vacation. Fred tried to seem as if it wasn't a big problem as my parents looked startled. I had none at all. I laid everything out without holdback. The years of favoritism, the never-ending bailouts, and how this was only the most recent illustration of Fred coming first over me. I told them I knew they wanted to assist Fred, but there had to be a line and this was it. I told them how much this wedding meant to me, how much work I had put into organizing it, and how heartbroken I felt that they would be ready to toss it all for travel. I then pulled out the material I'd collected, Copies of emails and texts between Fred and my parents debating the trip, the investors, and how they should keep it under wraps. I even kept a copy of the itinerary proving that the vacation fell during my wedding week. Fred was enraged that I had gone behind his back to obtain this information. My parents seemed to want to crawl under the couch. I gave no thought at all. I was not going to allow them to keep controlling me or guilt-inducing me about wanting to have my wedding as scheduled. Alice wasn't totally on board with the vacation, which also seemed to surprise Fred. He turned to her, but she only turned away to validate what I had said. Starting to yell, Fred said I was merely jealous since he was the successful one in the family and accused me of wanting to ruin his life. Saying she only wanted to help both of her children and didn't want to have to pick between us, my mom started crying. Silence from my dad really infuriated me. Usually the one to keep out of the drama, he would have been here to support me this time. At last Alice spoke up, saying she felt uneasy about missing the wedding given her knowledge of the whole truth. She claimed they had to come up with another approach to handle Fred's company issues outside of compromising family occasions. Fred seemed inclined toward conflict, but Alice held her ground. In that instant I did indeed start to respect her somewhat. I still had to finish though. They had to decide whether to give this trip first priority and miss my wedding or find another method to assist Fred that did not necessitate deserting me. I made it plain that I would not be changing the date. If they could not accept this, they were clearly choosing what they wanted. I let them decide over 24 hours. I warned them I would terminate relations with them should they decide not to show up for the wedding. I was not going to let them ruin my wedding day or allow them to treat me as though I did not matter. I even intimated that, should they compel me, I will publicly share the complete truth. I knew that his final requirement was for his possible investors to learn about his financial mess. This was my trump card. Fred was furious as my parents seemed as though they had been struck by a truck. Alice merely looked depressed. Though I was tired of being pushed about and of constantly putting Fred's wants second, I didn't want to do this. Telling them they knew how to get to me, I got up, walked out with Aaron. Things have been tough since that conference. Neither my parents nor Fred have heard from each other, hence I'm not sure what they will decide. I am thus simply waiting to find out whether my parents will at last prioritize me or whether this marks the end of our relationship as I know it. Update. My parents contacted out at last after what felt like an eternity. It was the longest 24 hours of my life, and as I waited for their judgment I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I knew nothing about what they would say when my phone rang, and part of me wanted not to hear it. My mother began her apology first. They had thought a lot, she stated following our last talk. They asked me to change the date and came to see how much this wedding meant to me and how cruel they had been. She said she hadn't thought about how much they were hurting me in the process and they had been overly preoccupied trying to save Fred from his most recent catastrophe. We chose to gather at my parents' house. Having Aaron at my side made me happy as he came to support me. You could see my folks were concerned since they were already here. Arriving soon afterward, Fred and Alice seemed defensive from the first. We all gathered in the living room and I lost no time. I began by informing them I knew Fred's financial problems and the true purpose of the Europe vacation. Fred tried to seem as if it wasn't a big problem as my parents looked startled. I had none at all. I laid everything out without holdback. The years of favoritism, the never-ending bailouts, and how this was only the most recent illustration of Fred coming first over me. I told them I knew they wanted to assist Fred, but there had to be a line and this was it. I told them how much this wedding meant to me. How much work I had put into organizing it, and how heartbroken I felt that they would be ready to toss it all for travel. I then pulled out the material I had collected, copies of emails and texts between Fred and my parents debating the trip, the investors, and how they should keep it under wraps. I even kept a copy of the itinerary proving that the vacation fell during my wedding week. Fred was enraged that I had gone behind his back to obtain this information. My parents seemed to want to crawl under the couch. I gave no thought at all. I was not going to allow them to keep controlling me or guilt-inducing me about wanting to have my wedding as scheduled. Alice wasn't totally on board with the vacation, which also seemed to surprise Fred. He turned to her, but she only turned away to validate what I had said. Starting to yell, Fred said I was merely jealous since he was the successful one in the family and accused me of wanting to ruin his life. Saying she only wanted to help both of her children and didn't want to have to pick between us, my mom started crying. Silence from my dad really infuriated me. Usually the one to keep out of the drama, he would have been here to support me this time. At last Alice spoke up, saying she felt uneasy about missing the wedding given her knowledge of the whole truth. She claimed they had to come up with another approach to handle Fred's company issues outside of compromising family occasions. Fred seemed inclined toward conflict, but Alice held her ground. In that instant I did indeed start to respect her somewhat. I still had to finish though. They had to decide whether to give this trip first priority and miss my wedding or find another method to assist Fred that did not necessitate deserting me. I made it plain that I would not be changing the date. If they could not accept this, they were clearly choosing what they wanted. I let them decide over 24 hours. I warned them I would terminate relations with them should they decide not to show up for the wedding. I was not going to let them ruin my wedding day or allow them to treat me as though I did not matter. I even intimated that, should they compel me, I will publicly share the complete truth. I knew that his final requirement was for his possible investors to learn about his financial mess. This was my trump card. Fred was furious as my parents seemed as though they had been struck by a truck. Alice merely looked depressed. Though I was tired of being pushed about and of constantly putting Fred's wants second, I didn't want to do this. Telling them they knew how to get to me, I got up, walked out with Aaron. Things have been tough since the conference. Neither my parents nor Fred have heard from each other, hence I'm not sure what they will decide. I am thus simply waiting to find out whether my parents will at last prioritize me or whether this marks the end of our relationship as I know it. Update: my parents contacted out at last after what felt like an eternity. It was the longest 24 hours of my life, and as I waited for their judgment I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I knew nothing about what they would say when my phone rang, and part of me wanted not to hear it. My mother began her apology first. They had thought a lot, she stated following our last talk. They asked me to change the date and came to see how much this wedding meant to me and how cruel they had been. She said she hadn't thought about how much they were hurting me in the process and they had been overly preoccupied trying to save Fred from his most recent catastrophe. She then informed me they had decided to postpone their European vacation. After all, they planned to be at the wedding. Surprised, I had readied myself for the worst since I knew Fred would be chosen once more. It was such relief to hear them select my wedding over the trip. Next my dad answered on the phone to validate what my mother had said. He said he will be there for me on my big day and apologies for not acting sooner. He also said they needed to rethink how they had been managing things as they were beginning to see how much Fred's problems will impact the family. Though it was a start, it was not precisely the sincere apologies I had been expecting for. Most important was that they were traveling to the wedding. I appreciated their choice and our call concluded on an unexpectedly upbeat note. It felt for the first time in a long time, like perhaps things might improve between us. My parents started canceling the Europe trip right away after the decision was made. As you could expect, Fred's reaction to them telling him the trip was cancelled was not great. Fred was irate. Almost right away, he called to ask what I had said to our parents to cause them to postpone the trip. I told him I had just told them the truth, that their participation at my wedding meant more to me than anything else and that they had to decide what was more vital. Fred said I was trying to harm his prospects of turning his company around, therefore accusing me of influencing them. He even implied that, driven by jealousy, I was trying to ruin his life. Though it was the same old song and dance I had heard from him a million times before, this time I resisted letting it get to me. I gently informed him that our parents had decided upon their own course and that I had nothing to do with his difficulties. He could be furious with someone, not with me, if he wanted to be angry with someone. Fred then hung up on me and I didn't hear from him for some time. Though I was concerned about how this would impact the wedding day, I was also glad my parents were at last seeing the whole picture. They had decided to be by my side, and that was a positive direction. Over the next several days, my parents began to examine their connection with Fred and me closely. Several times my mother checked in with me and during one of those calls she admitted that she and my dad had been discussing their treatment of us growing up a lot. She said they had always considered Fred as the one who required more help and attention due to his problems, but in doing so they had neglected my needs and taken my freedom for granted. She told me they were starting to understand how much they had harmed me over the years by always putting Fred first. Apparently, my dad brought it up saying they should constantly support Aaron and me rather than only during difficult times. This would help us. Though it was not a 180, it was the first time I had ever heard them freely admit their bias. They committed themselves to treat both of their children equally and to be more present in my life. Though I was unsure of how much of it would really stick, it was a lot to absorb. They were real, and it gave me hope that maybe going forward our relationship may become better. Regarding Fred, he remained enraged, but my parents were resolved not to let that control their behavior anymore. They were beginning to realize that continually rescuing him was not benefiting anyone. Not him, not them, and most certainly not our family as a whole. I never would have imagined hearing them suggesting they would start imposing some limitations on him. Fred obviously did not lie down for any of this. He intensified his efforts to pull my parents back on his side when he understood they were serious about calling off the vacation and attending the wedding. He began threatening our parents in all kinds of ways, including maybe suing them should they not follow through with the trip. He said he would have to sue them for breach of contract, should they fail to assist him with his business. They had pledged to help him. Though I believe Fred knew deep down, it was really an empty threat, and it highlighted his extreme need for their acceptance. Not one of my parents backed down. They advised him that their choice was definite and he had to work out his own issues without depending much on them. For them, this was a significant step, and even if it was difficult for them to challenge Fred, they knew it was essential. Fred continued from there though. He began trying to get other family members on his side by corresponding with them. Claiming that I had coerced our parents into postponing the trip in order to undermine him, he presented me as the villain. With some relatives following Fred's story, it created some conflict inside the extended family. Most of them saw through it and backed my parents' choice to give my wedding top priority. Fred tried his best, but his strategies for manipulation were less successful than they had been. People seemed at last seeing him for who he truly was, a person who was always seeking a handout instead of owning his own mistakes. All of this drama clearly creates a gulf inside the family. Certain of our relatives are firmly on Fred's side, thinking that our parents ought to have honored their word to support him no matter what. Viewed as the spoiled younger sister exploiting her wedding to create distance between the family, they perceive me. Others, particularly those who have seen how Fred's actions have impacted my parents over the years, support their choice to go to the wedding and begin enforcing limits with him. These days, family get-togethers are more contentious and individuals are silently siding. Those who believe I'm in the wrong will judge me. I try not to let that affect me. Aaron has been fantastic in keeping me focused on the positives. That is, that our wedding preparations are still underway and that my parents will be here to assist us. Not easy, but is it? I worry about how this would impact our family over time. Will this divide ever close or will it keep widening till it is too great to span? I know I have to be steadfast in my decisions even though I have no solutions. Especially when it involves compromising my own happiness, I cannot keep stopping backwards to fit everyone else. About Fred, I have no idea what his future holds. He is still looking for a means to salvage his company. Without our parents' financial support, it will be difficult. Aaron and I are concentrating on our wedding and the life we are creating together in the interim. Although the path has been difficult, I hope the changes my family is undergoing will result in a better, more balanced relationship for all of us down the road. Update. Though all the drama preceded the wedding, I wanted this day to be flawless. The day of the wedding eventually arrived. Aaron and I had worked so hard to make it unique, I simply wanted everything to go without incident. Nancy, my maid of honor, who has been my best friend since college, kept reminding me that today was about Aaron and me and that nothing else counted. At the site, a lovely garden estate, Aaron and I had fallen in love with the moment we first laid eyes on it. We were ready. Though I had not spoken to Fred since our previous chat, I knew my folks were on their way. Not sure whether he would show up or not, and the idea of a possible confrontation was weighing on me. The wedding was lovely, and I felt as luckiest person on earth as we exchanged our vows. Looking over at my parents in the front row, I saw my mum cleaning away tears. That was a little but important moment that gave me hope that perhaps we were headed in the correct direction after all. The ceremony itself lived out all I had hoped for. We kept it private, with just close family and friends, and the officiant did a fantastic job of making it seem heartfelt and personal. We snapped pictures in the yard following the ceremony. The setting was really lovely, the light was perfect. While things were still a little awkward, my parents joined us for some family photographs and it was obvious they were really delighted for us. They were trying, and it meant a lot to me. The welcome speeches were moving when it came time. My dad even shocked me with a moving toast in which he apologized for the recent conflict and said he was really pleased of the woman I'd grown to know. For him, it was a significant step and seemed like a fresh start even though it did not wipe out all that had transpired. Fred and Alice arrived just when I believed the day was running without any problems. They hadn't RSVP'd, so I wasn't sure whether they would show at all. They entered the midst of the reception and momentarily the place went quiet. Fred seemed to be carrying proof. He initially went up to our parents, had a little whispered talk with them and then moved over to Aaron and myself. Alice held back, clearly uneasy. Fred congratulated us when he got here, but he was obviously not really here to rejoice. He was there to make a point. Right in the middle of our wedding reception, he wanted to strike up a discussion on his company problems. Even on my wedding day, he seemed unable to tolerate not being the focal point of attention. Aaron moved in before I could speak. Fred was gently reminded by him that today was about celebrating our marriage and that this was not the time or place for business. Fred did not find it appealing. Aaron was not having it as he tried to protest. Fred gave up and turned away finally, But harm was done. I made every effort to ignore it and savor the remainder of the night. We danced, cut the cake and hung about with our loved ones. Though Fred tried to create drama, the evening closed on a good note. Officially, I married the love of my life. Nothing Fred did could take that away from me. Regarding Fred, his life has veered somewhat differently. My parents faced a tough choice following the wedding. They agreed to stop contributing financially. They came to see that continuously rescuing him was not doing him any good and that it was time for him to pay for his mistakes. Fred's company soon closed without our parents' assistance. He looked for additional investors, but those offers dropped through without the trip to Europe. He eventually had to start bankruptcy filings. He had trouble swallowing this harsh pill, hence his pride suffered greatly. At last Alice, who had been mounting annoyance with Fred's financial irresponsibility, reached her breaking point. She picked the children and left him, moving in with her parents as she worked out her future moves. Fred is learning to live alone and must start over in his life. Although I enjoy his demise less, I do believe this is the wake-up call he required. Perhaps now he will begin to take charge of his own life instead of depending on others to resolve issues. Only time will let us know. For Aaron and me, at last we can concentrate on our future free from all the familial strife. We intend to shortly start a family. We had to postpone our European honeymoon as well since all the wedding drama interfered. It seems like the ideal approach to honor our entering into this new phase of life. I want to pause to thank everyone on Reddit for their guidance and encouragement along this insane trip. Your statements gave me the will to defend myself and make some difficult decisions I might have otherwise backed off from. Though it wasn't simple, I'm rather happy I stayed with my guns.